So, I'd like to start by welcoming everyone here tonight. My name is Kevin Hill, and I am the City Assessor for the City of Oswego. I'd also like to welcome our guests. We have Devin Stewart from the New York State Office of Real Property Tax Services, Corey Metz from the County Real Property Office, and Dave Barnett from Gar Associates. I trust this evening's forum will be helpful and informative to property owners, and I look forward to your questions. First and foremost, I'd like to remind everyone that I am here, I'm available, and willing to meet or speak with you to help you navigate this process. I'm happy to sit down with you to look at your property, check and update your property inventory, run comparables, whatever is necessary to ensure that you can make an informed decision as to your next steps. My door is always open, and I'm willing to assist in any way that I can. That being said, I understand the frustration that property owners are feeling. I understand that you may be angry, confused, upset, or anxious. That is completely justified and understandable, but it's important to remember the assessment values that were provided are preliminary. There are several opportunities to have those values reviewed through informal review, formal grievance, and even an independent small claims assessment review, or SCAR. I'm happy to explain or help you with these processes. My job is to ensure that the assessment values ultimately reflected on the final assessment roll are fair and at a uniform percentage of value. It is correct, that level does not have to be 100% of market value, but currently, properties are at all different percentages of value, and that causes inequity in the calculation of property taxes. It's important to understand that even if values were at a lower uniform percentage, the distribution of property taxes, thus your resulting tax liability, would remain exactly the same. Currently, approximately 25% of city parcels are paying a disproportionately high amount of property tax. Within our business community, 82% are paying a disproportionately high amount of property tax. To put it plainly, those who saw a projected reduction in their property tax on their disclosure notice as a result of the reassessment were paying too much, and were actually subsidizing the property taxes of approximately 50% of the parcels in the city. 25% of parcels saw little or no change to their projected tax liability because they were already paying their fair share. For nearly all of these parcels, the preliminary assessed value reflected a significant increase, but nearly half of the city has a projected tax reduction or no change at all. That is possible because of a marked reduction in the tax rates for all of our taxing jurisdictions, city, school, and county, as a result of the city's increased total taxable assessed value. It's a difficult concept to understand, but Dave will be illustrating that concept shortly. My point is, we know unequivocally there is inequity in our current assessment structure that benefits a large portion of the city at the expense of a much smaller number of property owners. We're not here to point fingers or assign blame, but this is a problem we can and must fix. That is why in 2002, the Common Council unanimously approved the resolution to fund this project. I was on the Common Council at the time, Mayor Corradino was on the council at that time, and sitting councilors Burridge, Walker, Gozick, and Plunkett were also on the council. To the members of the current Common Council, I do not envy you or your position. You were elected by your neighbors, and your neighbors rely on you to carry out their will. As I recall from my time on the council, some decisions are harder than others, and some decisions are very unpopular. We are expected to be leaders, and that requires us to fully understand a particular issue and make an informed decision. I'm thankful that the majority of the members of this council have taken the time to ask questions, discuss this process, and meet with me so that they can make the best decision possible. I understand the position you're in and would like to provide information that may make your jobs a little easier this evening. The position of assessor, a role that I take very seriously, is governed by New York State real property tax law. The position requires state certification as well as extensive training and continuing education. The assessor is a public officer with a constitutionally protected office. I'm responsible for identifying real property as taxable or exempt and making appropriate entries on the assessment roll, identifying properties and their value for the purposes of taxation. I do not determine the amount of money the city spends, nor do I increase assessments to generate additional revenue. The assessment values are simply the vehicle by which an individual property's tax liability is calculated. As assessor, I have the autonomous authority to make assessments. The Common Council has no legal authority to change or modify determinations of the assessor. If a taxpayer believes that an assessment is unfair, there are legal options to seek a review of that determination, including the grievance process, SCAR reviews, or certiorari proceedings for commercial properties. This year, there is an additional process to seek a review of the preliminary values established by GAR. the informal review. The city charter states that the Common Council is vested with the power to correct the assessment rolls in the same manner as a board of supervisors may, by law, correct the town rolls of their county. However, these corrections are limited in scope, relate primarily to clerical errors, and in no way substitute the council's judgment for the determinations of value made by the assessor. The reason I'm providing this information is because the Common Council has been wrestling with the possibility of somehow putting a pause or canceling entirely the reassessment process and reverting to prior assessment values. There's even a petition being circulated to try to influence such action. The fact is, the Common Council has no such authority to take such action. The contract with GAR was approved, executed, the work substantially completed, and most, if not all, payments remitted. Furthermore, if we know that a certain number of property owners and most businesses in the city are being disproportionately taxed, how could we possibly return to those values and ask them to continue paying more than their fair share? If we step back and really consider the circumstances surrounding many of the properties that are projected to see a tax increase, how long has the property been underassessed, and has anyone considered the amounts that very likely should have been paid for years or longer but were not? As assessor, I'm required to sign an oath stating that our assessments are at a uniform percentage of value. Any objective analysis of our current assessments would demonstrate this is not the case. Any reversion to those values, in my opinion, is both illegal and unconscionable. So to the members of the Common Council, you're off the hook. For any property owner who's concerned about their preliminary assessment value, please reach out to me. I'll continue to assist in any way possible as we work to bring equity and fairness to our assessment roll. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Devin Stewart from the New York State Office of Real Property.
Thank you, Kevin. Is this working? So my name is Devin Stewart. Like Kevin said, I work for the New York State Department of Taxation and Finance. Within that department, I'm in the Office of Real Property Services. When a city or a town decides to do a reassessment, like Oswego did, we at a state level, we monitor the project. That just means that we follow along with the project, we talk to the appraiser, we talk with the assessor, we periodically have a progress report that we'll type up for the mayor, letting him know what the status of the project is. We also provide state aid, so the city of Oswego or any town that does a reassessment, we offer state aid of up to $5 per parcel. That all depends on the budget. The last time we paid state aid was in 2022 to not the city of Oswego, but different municipalities, and it was $3.50 a parcel at that time. So they say up to $5, but more recently it's been in the $3.50 range per parcel. And at a state level, we don't look at the individual assessments that like Kevin could or like an appraiser could. We just look at overall. We have the computer file that the appraiser's been using, and we just monitor it from there. So I'll be here throughout the meeting and happy to answer any questions. But for now, I'll turn it over to Dave.
Yeah. My name's Dave Barnett. I'm a partner at GAR Associates, and what I'd like to do is just walk you through a comprehensive sort of summary of what the project entails. Anytime we do any reassessment project, there's different forms and fashions of what we do. But as it relates to the city of Oswego, there's really three phases of this project. The first phase is the data collection phase. It's been a number of years since the city of Oswego has done a full comprehensive reassessment project. So the inventory needs to be cleansed. The inventory needs to be verified, needs to be validated. So way back when, it was about, I would say, the beginning of 2023, we started with data collection. And data collection is inventorying items on every parcel. Now, we call it improvements. There's, square footage, things of that nature. That's really dictated by New York State real property tax law. So we, GAR, inventoried items and really just cleaned up the file on every property. At the conclusion of the data verification phase, what we did was we mailed out what we call a populated survey. And the intention of that populated survey was before we looked at a sale, before we looked at a value, we asked you as a property owner to review the information, and if there was any discrepancies, you would mail it back to us or notify us so that we at least got the correct information on your property. And for those that you returned a survey and told us about certain things that we may or may not have known, I just want to say one thing is that because it's mass appraisal, we can't force our way into anyone's home. So we do it from the exterior. And even furthermore, since COVID, we did a lot from aerial imagery, but we also utilized any files or records if there was multiple listing services. This is not made up by GAR. This is what we are tasked to do, and that's the way we did it. And the intention of mailing out a survey so that if we did have something incorrect, that we would make the change. And so once we went from data verification, we moved into valuation, the valuation phase. A couple key components of the valuation phase. Something that's called neighborhood delineation. Neighborhood delineation is breaking up the city into market areas, neighborhoods. Now, they may not be close in proximity, they may be in different areas, but the thought process is that, sales, which are the basis of your value, are comparing to non-sales. So, in other words, we're trying to compare apples to apples. Now, properties are not, they're unique. They're not the same. So there's adjustments that are made. That if a house is bigger as it compares to a sale, that adjustment is made upwards or downwards. But neighborhood delineation is like the old real estate adage, location, location, location. Along with neighborhood delineation, we also did something that's called sales verification. Now, by New York State real property tax law, there's something that's called an arm's length transaction. That's not a distressed property, the bank has it, or a relative selling it to another relative. These are arm's length valid sales. So in conjunction with doing neighborhood delineation, we're also doing sales verification. Again, these sales and your value that everybody has received, preliminary value, is predicated and based on recent arm's length transactions, valid sales. So we go through a series, and I will say this, that it was collaborative with the assessment office. We have tried to maintain an element of transparency throughout the whole process, hence a website and printed documents that is available to you as a property owner. We have a dedicated hotline for people to call, toll-free number to get information. And we're also here, and I'm here, talking to you now. So we're trying to create an element of transparency. GAR Associates has been in business for 62 years. We've done reassessment projects for over 50 years. We've done reassessment projects before the state recognized what a reassessment project. Sorry, Devin, but that's the facts. And the truth is that we are now in the most popular phase because I recognize there's nothing mandating any municipality to carry their values at 100%. It's a uniform percent of value. And we've done a reassessment project, so that means that some have gone down, some have stayed the same, and some have gone up. We will profess to you that we don't know everything about everything. This is not an infallible process. What we're asking you now in the informal review process, the preliminary values that we've established, we're asking you to provide information to us. If you think that your assessment is excessive, you have an opportunity now to challenge your assessment, provide documentation. We feel that your values are substantiated, but we also recognize that we didn't get into every home. There's extenuating circumstances with every property that if you choose to come to an informal, a couple key statutory dates, because there is some misconceptions and some myths and some chatter and some misinformation. As it is every year, the tentative roll is filed May 1st. The final roll is filed July 1st. That doesn't change in a reassessment project. You have the ability, as you do every year, to challenge your assessment in grievance day. So what we're providing now is a period of time, an informal review period of time, this phase now. And what we'll do is meet with property owners, we will take information from property owners, review that information, consult with the assessor on recommendations, and a decision will be made if you come to an informal review. That decision may be a reduction where you feel that it's more reflective of your market value. There's no further action required. In the event that you do not get the reduction that you feel is warranted, or in the event that there is no change to your assessment, you have another opportunity to challenge your assessment. In fact, you have 2 more opportunities after the informal review if you choose. You can go to what's called the Board of Assessment Review and Grievance Day, and Corey will speak about that. That's an independent panel, separate from GAR Associates, and in fact, separate from your assessor. What you do have in common with them is that they're residents of the city of Oswego. They render a decision. So let me just go back to some key statutory dates. The informal review period is happening now. You will receive notification if you choose to go to the informal review in and around May 1st. The grievance day with the Board of Assessment Review, the tentative roll is filed May 1st, as it is every year. If you do not get the reduction that you want, or you choose not to come or speak to GAR Associates, you'll go to grievance day. And if you don't get the result that you want from grievance day, there's an additional litigation, either through small claims or if you're a commercial property owner, a judicial filing called an Article 7. My point is, and why I'm stressing this, is that I recognize when you don't do a reval for a long time, there's sticker shock. I do understand that. I do these type of workshops and presentations across New York State. I live in New York State. I recognize New York State taxes. I get that. Part of the problem is there's nothing mandating anybody to do a project of this nature. The goal of this project, when it's all said and done, is that you have fair and equitable assessments. That someone is not, a property owner, is not unfairly carrying someone else's tax burden. And this is a clear and concise process to follow through at least what we can control. Please, do not file an informal review and tell me that your taxes are too high. There is no control that we have over that. You're in the right room, but with the wrong guy and the wrong night and the wrong panel. We encourage you and we ask you to engage in the process because there will be reductions that, where warranted, that are granted. And if you get your assessment reduced, then there's no further action. And if you do not, it's not reduced at all or not reduced enough, you do have another opportunity to challenge, and you have another opportunity after that in the worst case scenario. It's a 3-step process, a potential 3-step process.
So 3 strikes and you go in dryer.
I didn't hear that.
3 strikes and you go in dryer.
3 strikes, I can't hear you.
I said 3 strikes and you go in dryer on us. Get us really up the rear.
Well, no. Again, you have an opportunity. I guess my point is that nothing is set in stone as it stands right now. I'm gonna. Can we just get through the presentation because Corey from the county is going to speak, and then I'm happy to do any question and answer after. Yeah, absolutely.
My turn? Kevin, where's that microphone that you that one there? I want to stand. All right, thank you, everyone. My name is Corey Metz, and I'm the County Director of Oswego's Real Property Tax Service. And what I have for you tonight is a presentation that is one of my duties every year is to train the Board of Assessment Review. There's 98 members on the various boards throughout the county, and every 5 years they require training, and every year I give that training. So this presentation is basically the first third of that training, the other 2/3 being specific to them as board members. So I'm hoping that this is going to be informative about property taxes and assessments, which are really the only two topics that we're going to be talking about with this. So I'm going to jump in, and I'm going to talk at you for a little while here, okay? I promise I won't do any karaoke. So we have a brief history of assessment. So assessments are really two things. They're both a value that's placed on property and also whether or not real property is even subject to taxation or special levies. They've been in practice in the United States since around 1798. That was when the first property tax levy was done by the federal government, which they don't obviously do anymore. Modern assessment standards date back to 1971 with the passage of the Assessment Improvement Law, which was actually a series of laws that New York State passed to bring assessing up to a modern standard. It's things that require things like my office to exist, for example, assessors to actually be trained and certified, things of that nature. So the laws that dictate this, some of them anyway, we have Real Property Tax Law Section 300 that states all real property is subject to taxation unless exempt by law. Section 302 says that all real property must be assessed according to its condition and ownership as of March 1st, known as taxable status date. Section 304 says all assessments are against the real property itself. Section 305 states that all real property must be assessed at a uniform percentage of market value. The goal of assessment is pretty simple. It's the fairest and most equitable distribution of the real property tax burden among taxpayers. That's really the goal at the end of the day. What gets assessed for taxes is that every property on an assessment roll is called a parcel, and that same parcel is represented on a tax map. The tax map is maintained by my office at the county, and it's used by assessors in the function of their duties of assessing real property. Parcels have boundaries that are described in deeds and surveys, and the land and improvements, the real property, which is land and all things affixed to the land, that fall within those boundaries determine what gets assessed and a value placed on it. For example, here we have a tax map, and we have an aerial photo of the same property. This is actually my property. It's in the town of Scriba, though, if you couldn't tell, because it's certainly not in the city. So we have the tax map on the left shows some kind of schematic information about the property. 1.87 acres, frontage and depth. Not really much more than that. You get the general size, location, that sort of thing. Those same lines are placed on top of aerial photos, and then anything that's within those blue lines that you probably can't see from that side of the room, but there are blue lines there that show the boundaries, and anything that's in there, which would be the house and other improvements, gets assessed along with the land. One of those laws that was on the previous slide was about taxable status date. All property is assessed according to its value as of that date. It's March 1st. Ownership means, for exemption purposes, who is the owner when applying for an exemption. That makes March 1st the deadline for filing all exemption applications or renewals of exemptions for the ones that require that. And condition means the current use and physical status of the real estate in determining its assessed value. Some examples of taxable status date would be, say, a home that's under construction and wasn't done on March 1st, but it got valued as a complete structure. It should have been valued at a fraction of it based on how much was finished. Or a home that burns down on February 28th would be assessed for a now vacant lot, since it wasn't physically there anymore on March 1st. But a home that burns down on March 2nd was physically there on March 1st, so it would get assessed and taxed for the subsequent tax levies, and then get corrected on the next assessment roll that came out. Who determines assessments? I think everyone already knows this. It is the assessor, a locally appointed official responsible for maintaining the assessment roll, determining or obtaining market values, and establishing taxable status of parcels, processing exemption applications, and determining eligibility for those exemptions, and determining the level of assessment and setting those assessed values. who uses assessments are taxing jurisdictions. The county, the city, the school district, special districts like fire, light, water, and sewer, which don't really apply here in the city. That's more of a town thing. But each taxing district has its own tax levy, an amount to be raised in taxes, and these assessments really just apportion that levy into individual tax bills. You might have heard this expression used before, but if the tax levy is a pie, the assessments only determine the individual pieces of that pie. So market values are what assessments are based on. And all property has value, which sounds like a bold statement, but value is created when there is utility, desire, need, or scarcity. Land has utility, it's scarce, it's unique, it's immobile, durable, finite. So because people find land useful, people have given it value. And that's an important statement to remember because no one is setting market value. Market values are extracted from analyzing the market, looking at valid real estate sales, looking and trying to figure out what the dollar amount a property could reasonably sell for on the market. This chart here shows the market value trends over the last 3 years. And what we mean by trend here is basically the increase in sales prices compared to the previous year. And the way to read this is that residential sales, typically on average here, are selling for 30% higher than they were 3 years ago. Commercial properties are selling on average 12% higher than 3 years ago. And vacant land is 25% higher than 3 years ago. And this, and
If you're going to go year from year, there's a decrease year from year. That's basic business. That's not accounting for what's going to happen in 2024 or 2025. There's a decrease.
I would appreciate not being interrupted. There is a Q&A section after I am done speaking, and you can ask these questions and make your comments heard. But I would appreciate some respect, please. Thank you. There are 3 approaches to market value that are used by both appraisers and assessors, because an assessor and an assessment really is an appraisal at the end of the day. You have a sales comparison approach, a cost approach, and an income capitalization approach. Now, these next 3 slides are going to present a lot of information that I don't expect anyone to know. There is no quiz, but I just want to cover it to try and just get this information out there on how these approaches are done. So a sales comparison approach is a 5-step process that involves collecting data on sales and listings and contracts, analyzing those to see if the sales are comparable to your subject. Your subject is the one you're trying to find the value for. You develop units of comparison. These could be things like square footage of the house, number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, whether there's a garage or not. You adjust the comparable sales prices based on their dissimilarity to the subject, and you reconcile it to an opinion of value. The cost approach is also a 5-step process that develops an opinion on land value, estimates the reproduction cost of improvements, usually using some sort of published manual on construction costs and labor costs by zip code, and deducting depreciation from that to estimate the value of site improvements and accessory buildings, and then reconciling all that together into an opinion of value. This one's lesser used for residential values, simply because the sales comparison is typically better for that, because it's using the actual sales prices to come up with an opinion of value. But this one can be useful for certain types of unique properties that don't maybe have a lot of sales, or new construction, that sort of thing. And then income capitalization is used for income producing properties, so commercial properties, as a 6-step process that is estimating potential gross income, driving losses, so on and so forth. This one I'm going to blow through a little bit here. But this is converting income into value through that analysis. Again, don't expect anyone to know anything about this. This is just information. So valuation date, every property gets assessed as of a valuation date. Like taxable status date, there's that single date where all the values are supposed to be derived as of. July 1st of the prior year is the valuation date. So that would be, for this assessment roll, July 1st, 2023. In other words, based on the condition of the property on March 1st, what would the property have sold for in last July's real estate market? That's what these assessments are supposed to represent. So a fee appraisal or mass appraisal, what's the difference between the two? So a fee appraisal is an individual determination of value on a single property. It's only concerned with finding the value of that one single property, typically done by a single individual. And your quality control to find out if that appraisal was good or not is really based on the judgment of the appraiser and the breadth of research that was undertaken by them when they made it. Mass appraisal, on the other hand, is a determination of value on a universe of properties. In this case, the entire city of Oswego being the universe of properties being mass appraised as of the same date and time. You're concerned more with maintaining equity and value between all of the parcels. It may involve different individuals at different stages of the process. It typically takes a long time. In the case of this reassessment, it's been in the works for 2 years now. Quality control is more measured with statistical testing, whether to gauge consistency of values. So less to do with the judgment or depth of research that was performed and more, does it statistically test well? Mass valuation tends to use, pretty much exclusively these days, computer-assisted mass appraisal, valuing a large group of properties as of at the same time using common methods and data, applies those 3 approaches to value on a mass scale, and applies those trends across more than one property. It's the most cost-effective way to do this type of work, because fee appraisal, going door to door and appraising every property one by one, is not cost-effective. And it's commonly used in reassessments, revaluations, which it was. And actually, most assessing is done using mass valuation. So why would you want to do a reassessment? Well, the real estate market doesn't move in a straight line. Some property values increase at a faster rate than others. Some property values decrease with time. Different neighborhoods, different types of properties increase and decrease at different rates. So periodically, assessments need to be reevaluated to ensure that there's equity. And when there isn't equity, that's when you do a reassessment project. This is reassessment activity throughout the state. There's a map of New York State there, and all of the green municipalities are ones that have had a reassessment since 2018. The state average is 38% of municipalities having done a reassessment within the last, well, that's the last 6 years now. Oswego County is a little below that at 33%. Not a lot of reassessments happen, typically because, like Dave said, there's no mandate to do them. You just have to make sure that there's equity on your roll, and doing a reassessment project is time-consuming, it's costly, and unpopular. So, assessment methods and standards, though. This was the law that stated that all real property shall be assessed at a uniform percentage of value. And that's what the level of assessment shows. So the assessed value, as we've said, is related to the market value. And every municipality has their own level of assessment. A level of assessment of 100% means that your assessed value is equal to your market value. And a level of assessment of 50% would be assessed value equal to half the market value, so on and so forth. That level of assessment usually goes down every year because the market fluctuates a lot. The market is always going up and down, and assessments are not keeping pace year to year typically because they are only set once a year. So most likely market is increasing at a faster rate than assessments are. This map shows the county, all the municipalities in the county and what their levels of assessment are. The darker purple ones are ones that have a lower level of assessment. This was from last year, so the city of Oswego was at 83%, meaning assessments were representing 83% of their full market value. And only one municipality on this map was at 100, and that is West Monroe. I'm sorry? West Monroe is the only one that's at 100. Yep. Yep. And West Monroe's at 100 because they've been doing reassessment activity every year, actually, for the past 5, 6 years? At least, yeah, even more than that. Yeah, they reassess annually in West Monroe, so. So the level of assessment is determined by the assessor, but New York State is also determining the ratio of assessed values to market values. These ratios are called equalization rates. And that rate is used to equalize the value whenever there's a tax levy that includes more than one assessing unit that are at different levels, which from the map on the previous slide you can tell is almost everyone is at a different level. Both the level of assessment and equalization rate, though, are measurements of equity or of uniformity on a municipal scale. Like Devin said, the state really only looks at the total. They're looking at the city as a whole and not at individual properties, which means that these ratios may not be accurate for individual properties, and unless reassessments were done recently, individual market values are probably not accurately producing equitable tax bills across different segments of the county and school districts. So equalization rates really aren't important for city taxes, but they're very important for county and school taxes. And this is, no one can see this. So I'll try to explain it though, anyway. So this is the school tax levy, City of Oswego School District from last year. They had a tax levy of a little over $27 million, and there are 6 segments that make up the school district. There's a part of the town of Sterling in Oneida County, the entire City of Oswego, and then parts of Minetto, town of Oswego, Scriba, and Volney. They all have different taxable assessed values, which is the aggregate or the total of all the assessments in each of those segments. But they all have different equalization rates. So if you were to try and break this school tax levy out fairly using just the assessed value, that wouldn't work because everybody's at a different level. So the first thing that gets done is to bring everybody up to the full value, which is done by taking the taxable value and dividing it by the equalization rate, and then figuring out what everybody's portion of that full value represents. So Sterling was 0.3%, City of Oswego 53.6%, Minetto 6.3%, Town of Oswego 15.7%, Scriba 23%, and Volney 1%. And then those percentages are multiplied against the original school tax levy to figure out everyone's share of the school taxes. Once you have that, you go back to your original taxable assessed value of the city and the share of the school taxes you just calculated, and you come up with a school tax rate that is unique to the City of Oswego. And then everybody in the school district has their own tax rate, because the idea is that 2 homes that are fundamentally the same market value but in different parts of the school district should have similar tax bills. And by doing it this way, places that have a lower level of assessment have a higher tax rate, and places that have a higher level of assessment have a lower tax rate, so that the tax bills come out more evenly. Which brings us into the property tax and almost the end of this presentation. So a brief history of the real property tax is that it dates back, in the New York State at least, to about 1654, when New York was the Dutch New York colony. In those days, it was determined as a quota of tax that was to be collected by counties, and then the county in turn determined the quota for each town and ward within the county, and then the town and ward divided up the quota amongst the land parcels based on whatsoever had been deemed the worth or value thereof, whatever that means. Nowadays, the real property tax is an ad valorem tax, which means it's a tax according to value. It's the largest source of funds to meet municipal and school budgets. And it is a layered tax system. It means it's assessed once by the local assessor, and then each jurisdiction uses that assessor's value to tax the property. This chart here shows all of the tax levies that affect the city, which would be the school, the county, and the city taxes, for 2019 to 2023. So when you put them all together, the properties here in the City of Oswego are subject to a little under $35 million in tax levies every year. The first about 15 or so million of that is the school taxes, and then about 5 or 6 million here in county taxes, and the remainder is the city taxes. So they all use the same local assessed value, but then tax on that throughout the year. And hopefully that layer visual makes sense. Like income taxes, there are also exemptions for property taxes. They offer relief from taxation for eligible properties. And as a reminder, unless a property is exempt in some capacity, all real property is subject to taxation in New York State. There's various types of exemptions, such as exemptions based on how the property is used, which might be things like the agricultural exemptions, membership in an exempt class, like exemptions for veterans, exemptions based on the owner's ability to pay the tax, such as the low-income senior exemptions and disability exemptions, and then exemptions that exist for the desire of state and local governments to encourage economic or social growth and development, like business improvement exemptions or solar wind exemptions. Calculating a tax levy is relatively simple once you have the budget. You take your total expenses, minus out your total revenues, and anything left over is the property tax levy. So that levy can go up or down based on the expenses and revenue. You have more expenses and the revenue stays the same, your tax levy goes up. You have less expenses and the revenue stays the same, your tax levy goes down. More revenue means a lower tax levy, less revenue means a higher tax levy, so on and so forth. It is that simple. To get the tax rate then, once you have a tax levy, you divide it by the total taxable assessed value of all the property that tax affects, and come up with a tax rate, which is then usually multiplied by 1,000 to come up with the dollars per thousand of assessed value that it represents. To calculate an individual tax bill, you take the taxable value, which is the assessment, minus any partial exemption that it might be receiving, divide that number by 1,000, and multiply that by the tax rate. So for example, we have a property assessed at $65,000, divide that by 1,000 becomes 65, times a tax rate, 15.67, gives you a tax bill of $1,018.55. That's how tax bills are calculated. And we're wrapping up now into key dates in the assessment process. Kind of covers some things that were already mentioned, but valuation date we talked about, that was July 1st of last year. Taxable status date, the ownership and condition of the property as of March 1st. The tentative roll will be filed by the assessor on May 1st, which contains those tentative assessed values. Your grievance day is the 4th Tuesday in May, where your Board of Assessment Review will meet in this room, actually, right? I think they meet here.
Upstairs.
Is it
third
upstairs?
floor. Yep.
All right, so one floor up, they meet on the 4th Tuesday in May, and that's where the administrative review happens. And then the final roll gets filed on July 1st, which contains any changes from grievance day. And there are some online resources I just want to make sure that everyone is aware of. So you have on your OswegoNewYork.org page, your assessor has a website page here with information on assessments as well as links to exemption application forms. My office has a website on the county's page, OswegoCounty.com/RPTS, which has a lot of information on the side, specifically 2 sections that are titled For Property Owners and Property Owner Guides, has a lot of information and links for you folks. New York State Tax and Finance, tax.ny.gov, has a similar page designed for property owners. This is new too, right? Yep. This just came out. So focus just for information for property owners. And then the last one is the Image Made Online website, rptsweb.oswegocounty.com. That one, most people I think are familiar with. That's the website you can go to and look up people's assessments for any property in the county. So just to review, all real property is assessed. Assessor determines the market values. Assessment is based on the market value. Taxing jurisdictions are the ones that impose taxes, and assessments only determine the share of taxes by parcel. So again, the tax levy is the pie. Assessments only determine the individual piece. And that is it. That's all I had.
Thank you, Corey. So at this time, we will open the floor to any questions anyone has. If anyone has specific questions or comments related to their property, I would ask that you reserve those and come and see me personally. I will take all the time that is needed to answer your questions. We will sit as long as we need to get each individual situation worked out. I think that's very important. I am making myself available. I think that we need to kind of curtail the misinformation that's been circulating, kind of get some control over the messaging that's out there. The reassessment process is not intended to disadvantage anyone. It doesn't generate revenue for the city. It's purely to make the tax collection fair, to properly assess properties so that those numbers are representative of each individual property's component of the community, therefore their share of the taxes. So that's why we did the project. That's why all of the councilors on the council in 2022 unanimously supported it. We knew the numbers would be dramatically higher. There was no way of knowing how high. And again, no process is perfect. There are lapses of information we need to know. If the inventory is wrong, we'll fix it. Anything we need to do to make sure these records are accurate and the numbers are accurate is exactly why I'm here, our office is here. I will make time for every single person that wants to look at their numbers. So I just want to make that clear. The last meeting was pretty contentious, and you know what? As taxpayers, you have an absolute right to express the way you feel to your representatives. It is 100% within your rights to do that. But today's really about information. We have all the players at the table, so let's try to keep it, limited to information. We have a sign-up sheet we'll get through first, and then if there's anyone after we get through this list, we can do that. So first, I have Anthony Leota, 43 West 6th Street. There's a microphone right behind you if you'd like. Oh, you just want to leave information? Okay, absolutely. I can grab that. Got it. Thank you, Morgan. Okay, perfect. All right, thank you. Next, I have Joe Meza, 146 Arcadia Ave. Yep. Thank you. Okay.
Hi, my name's Joseph Meza. I live at 146 Arcadia Ave, Oswego, New York. I've been in the Brittany Hill area for 27 years. I'm kind of going to repeat myself a little bit. I've been fighting with assessments and unequal assessments and whatever. I've been in front of the board before, and nothing ever becomes of it. But I have a question. How much is in the reserve? I'm just curious.
Mayor, do you know the amount in reserve? $14 million.
Wow. That's pretty good. Anyways, I want to thank you for all the history lessons from everybody, New York State, City, from GAR, especially from you. So I'm trying to be respectful. But this paperwork I'm looking at, the first page is pretty easy to fill out. It's pretty, I could do it pretty easy. But the second page, and this is for you, Gar, 62 years you've been doing this, and with the pandemic, of course, you can't go in people's houses, but the pandemic held you from coming and looking at properties and doing the job properly. But anyways, the second page says, give me comparable residential places to my place. So last week when I spoke, I said that there's 12 townhouses identical to mine, and I built half of them. So all the square footage is the same, the properties are pretty much exactly the same, but the problem is all the assessments are different. 189, as high as 217. I'm at 193. I have a friend that he's at 197, 195, 198. So when I go to the store to buy groceries, I bring my wallet. So I know what I'm going to do with it. So I need it there to buy groceries or buy gas or whatever. But in this battle with this tax assessment, I don't know what to bring because I don't know what's going on. This panel, respectfully, totally confused everybody, and she was the end of it with this long presentation of a history class. We're not here for history or what's going on in the other countries and states or whatever. We're here to want to know how much is it going to cost. That's the bottom line here. So I can't even fill this out and send it back to GAR because I can't, there's nothing in my development that's comparable to my house because every one of them's different. Every single house in that development is a different number. How is that, directing my question now to you from GAR,
Yeah.
how is that possible? How?
Well, the people make improvements on homes.
No,
they
no, no,
have-
no. I've been there 27 years.
Yeah.
And I'll say it in front of everybody, and I'm not bragging. I've got the nicest townhouse there, okay?
Yeah.
The nicest one. And as far as I'm concerned, my place should be assessed for more. I don't care about assessment. I care about how much it's gonna cost me. If it's gonna cost me $3,000 more than I'm paying now, I'm not in. 500, 800, yeah, I could eat that, but not $3,000, $2,000, $2,500. I've been there 27 years. My house has been assessed 5 times. 120 to 90, 90 to 110, 110 to 120. From 120 in 2014, it went 20,000 up to 140. And now, we're knocking on my door for 193. And the other part of this is what do I get as a taxpayer for my taxes? I'll tell you what I get. We're on the end of the food chain, the last development. We're the last ones to get plowed. I plowed that whole development before just so people could get out with my own personal truck. And this is kind of stuff that's kind of crazy and stupid, but it bothers me. I can only remember one time my fire hydrants were flushed in that development. One time in 27 years. They've never even painted the fire hydrants. When I was a kid, every fire hydrant was red and the top was yellow. You know what mine are? Like a pinkish orange and a blue. They were the original color since they put them in there when they developed this property. That's what I get from my tax dollars. And now they want more? And I'm sure everybody in this room can agree with me. I'm a simple guy. I try to keep it basic. All this technical stuff is just putting up another smoke screen to confuse everybody and to pretty much take the air out of our balloon. Well, so that's, my question is how much is it gonna cost? And nobody has an answer because nobody knows. So how can we go to battle and say our assessment's too high? Maybe it's not too high, but if it's gonna cost us $2,000 more, yeah, it's too high. But we don't know. So how do you combat that?
Well, if I could go from the fire hydrant back.
Yeah, sure.
When you say, what do I get from my taxes, we don't establish levies and services. And you're directing the question at me.
Well, I'm directing the question to whoever can answer the question.
Just let me finish. Our role and responsibility is the assessment. Now, what you get in terms of the services for the city, that we don't establish that. And what you're saying is, how much am I going to pay? As mentioned with the dates, the levies and the budgets have not been set yet. They won't be set until August, maybe, for the school. Right. So I can understand you're saying, okay, how much am I going to dip in my pocket? And unfortunately, I'm not trying to be evasive, but there's no way that anybody can tell you what that's going to be. The one thing that we do control is your assessment, your preliminary value. So when you say, how do I combat that? You combat it from the sense that saying, and this is your words, okay? I'm using your words.
That's fine.
Say, I have the nicest townhome
That's right.
in the neighborhood.
That's right.
Okay. So is it assessed fairly as it relates to your assessment in comparison to everybody else? And that's true of everybody in here, is that what is your value? I can't speak to the tax liability. What we did try to project and were required by law is to give you a hypothetical tax illustration of what may or may not happen to your taxes. It's hypothetical because of 2 reasons. There's more than 2 reasons, but 2 main reasons. The total taxable value for the city, it right now is a moving target. And the reason that it's a moving target is because there's going to be reductions that are granted. The final number, that final pie, is a moving target because we not only have informals, and then we have grievance, and then there's small claims. The roll will not be final until July 1st. That's when it's final. Then that number, that taxable value number for the city, for the various taxing entities, is established. Then they have the budget. The same way that the total taxable value, the pie, is one thing, but the budget is the other aspect of this, because it's a mathematical equation. What they need, whether it's the school, county, or city, divided into the pie. Our role and our responsibility in all of this, and what we can control and what your assessor's office can control, is your value. I know, I understand, and I'm not trying to be evasive. I get it. You're looking what you got to dip into your pocket, but I can't project that. All I can say is, if you disagree with your value, that's where we can say, all right, look, there's about 6,600 parcels. I'm not saying every one is right or correct. It's not, that's why we do this process. That's why we have the informal review process. But your taxes, your services, you know, I said it at the beginning, if you have a problem with that, you're with the wrong panel. You're in the right room, I think. Wrong panel, wrong day. Your value, that's what we can answer to.
Well, I think I'm sitting in front of the right panel. I think this panel was set up to confuse people more so than they're confused already. So I'll make it real easy, and I'll go back to basics. My question is, why are the 12 townhouses where I live have all the same measurements, 47.5 feet wide by 170 feet long? There's one there that's a little bit bigger. And same square footages, and they all got different numbers.
Well, I think, as I mentioned,
There's no thinking, it's all done, it's wrong. Basically, that's wrong. You can't have,
You're-
you
sir.
can't have all these chairs in line and every one of them's a different price.
Sir, I afforded you,
I'm done.
as I said at the beginning, not every property is identical. So there's some that have made improvements, there's some that are bigger.
He's got the nicest one, and his is the highest assessment.
Well, that, with all due respect, that's his opinion of whether he has the nicest one.
That $5,000 tree your neighbor has in the
I
backyard.
got people in this room who tell you I got the nicest home. I ain't pulling my own chain.
Yeah, well, again, you're entitled to your opinion.
Okay, we're gonna move on now. So there is a 5-minute limit to comments, so we're gonna try to adhere to that. As I said before, please keep the comments on topic. You know, just let's be respectful of each other. This is supposed to give you the opportunity to ask relevant questions. The comments coming from the peanut gallery in the back are not productive. You know, it's the same crew every time trying to disrupt these processes. It's really getting old. It's just ridiculous, and it's embarrassing that our city has to reflect itself this way in front of guests. And I hate to say that, but let's show them respect. Let's ask on-topic questions. If anyone in this room disagrees with their value, come see me. There's 6 different ways we can look at this. I will give you everything you need to fight the value. So to stand here, disparage GAR, disparage any of us, the city, the way we spend, it's wrong. It's wrong. It's disrespectful, and it's Gary, you have been disseminating misinformation since this process began, lying to people. So I'm not listening to that anymore. It's been enough. Your political aspirations, we all know. We know that's why you're here. So let's move on. I apologize for that, but we're here for one purpose, to get information out there, make sure people know how to get through this process. That's it. So let's move on. John Roy, 124 Arcadia Ave.
Thank you. To Dave, I want to talk to Dave about the lots. They've increased substantially, and I have a vacant lot next to my townhouse at Brittany Hill. And there's 4 lots there, and they're on the market for $79,900. which makes it 20,000 a lot, and yet our $20,000 lots went up to 32, 33,000, and I wanted to know why.
That would be something that you could present in an informal review for us to look at.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I've sent my appeal in to you, and we have to wait till May to get that, or is it gonna come
I
out?
would say in and around May 1st. The tentative roll is filed May 1st,
Okay,
so you can expect it in and around that date if you do come to an informal.
where would that be, here, or?
The Board of Assessment Review will be the potential
No,
next step.
you're-
We're going to mail you notification.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Would that be out before May 1st, though, if you've already submitted it?
Well, we'll do everybody at once, so
Oh, okay.
we're doing that period, but it'll be
Okay.
in and around May 1st.
Okay. The other thing is, I agree with Joe, that these townhouses are pretty much all the same size, the larger ones. My assessment came at 198. My next-door neighbor, we got a dividing wall between, because it's a duplex, she's at 191. And I was wondering why there's such a difference, 7,000? Joe's got the best ones at 193.
Yeah. Yeah, again, that's something that we could certainly look at.
Yeah,
Is there, are there improvements that have been made afterwards? Again, what the informal review process does is the same way that we did it initially. It makes it parcel specific. So when you come in
Yeah.
and you challenge your assessment in an informal review, I can't sit here and say everybody's going to get the reduction, because there's people out there that think that their value for an assessment is $1, and then when they go to sell it, they think it's $1 million. So what we're trying to do is make it parcel specific and make sure that we get your value correct.
okay. And the other thing with the sale of houses, and I don't think I'm far from wrong, that people also put in the realtor fee to cover their expenses for the realtor fee, and maybe the closing cost. They add to the value of the house, so you're paying taxes on fees too, I would think.
Well,
That's what makes me think 100% isn't the right way to go.
well, I think 100%, there's certain inherent benefits of being at 100%.
Yeah,
Just to the whole. Exemption amounts will go up to the full allowed, established by New York State amount. What you're speaking about is potentially concessions, and there's a legal document that's filed anytime a property transfers that's called a 5217. So if there's anything, what you're talking about, seller's concessions that are above and beyond what's customary in fees in a real estate transaction, the attorney is to put those on and they're considered.
okay. All right,
All right.
yep, thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Bill Meyer?
Hi. I just got a few questions, I guess. First of all, why did we need to be assessed at 100%? What was the matter with 83? I mean, I did the math. If I go from 83 to 100%, my evaluation or my assessment went from 210 to 246. I mean, that's an automatic raise without going crazy with the rest of the assessment to 328. But I mean, I just don't understand that. And again, I'd like to know what the advantage is if it wasn't to raise taxes. If we got $14 million in our reserve, how much do we need? I mean, I know there's a recommendation by the state. Maybe the taxation lady could answer that question. But I mean, is it 14 million that we need in the reserve? I mean, do we have a big plan to build like I don't know what?
So I'll speak, and then the 83% number is an aggregate number that doesn't reflect individual parcels' level of assessment. So the assessor determines the citywide level of assessment. Generally, that agrees with the state's number, but in the city of Oswego, based on the preliminary numbers of the revaluation, we have properties at levels of assessment ranging from 30 or 40% or less up to 100% or maybe even slightly more. So that aggregate number is not a true, accurate account of the true level of assessment of all the properties in the city.
Well, I guess I'd have to ask, why wasn't everybody assessed at 83% then?
And
that's obviously not our
Yep.
fault. I mean, that's somewhere along the line the administration dropped the ball, but
so
Yep, I would
again,
say-
that's something that we
So
can't
if it was
answer.
all raised to 83%, I mean, you're bringing everybody up to, if 83 was the max, then you've still brought everybody up to the max, but now you're taking the max and going one step farther, and then you went one step above that. Like I say, I'd go from 246 to 328, it's another $80,000.
But proportionally speaking, if you're at 83% or 100, it doesn't make a difference to your tax liability, because as long as your value is appropriate within that level of assessment, your tax liability is exactly the same. So it
Well-
doesn't matter. That's why it has to be an equal level for everyone, so that you remain at the same proportional space, no matter what the level of assessment is. So it doesn't matter if it's 10, 20, 100, as long as it's equal, then everyone's tax liability stays the same based on their property.
Okay, is it true or not true that the taxes go up according to the percentage, the average percentage of that the assessment went up? In other words, if the average percent, when the assessments come in, if the average for all the assessments, say it's 15%, that's what the average would be going up. If someone comes in at 12%, their taxes actually decline. That's according to New York State. So if you're above 15%, that means your taxes go up. I have the papers if you want to look at them. So I mean, so you're saying, you're telling me one thing, but it's all going to be on the average of the assessment. In other words, if my assessment went up, I don't know, 55%, so obviously I'm out of that group. But I mean, if the average percentage goes up 15% or 10%, then whoever's over that figure, their taxes are going to go up. If anybody's below that, then the taxes are going to go down.
that's
But we
correct.
need, what is the figure? We need to know what is the average, what was the average that the assessments went up?
So basically, you're referring to the break-even point where your taxes, depending on the increase of value, would stay the same,
Right, if
go
my
up or go
assessment
down.
went up 15%, and that was and that was the average,
Yeah, I think
then you-
Gar, you may have that calculation.
I think it was 58% total. That's how much the roll went up.
so the average was 58%. So if
That's
you,
how much the roll went up in total, really across each.
so what I'm asking is, if you're at 55%, then your taxes should have went down, according to New York State.
Not New York State, so each.
Oh, yeah, New York State, I got it right here.
No, what I'm saying is to keep with the pie went up. So, again, with the.
I get what you're saying about the pie. But
Yeah.
what I'm saying is, my assessment went up $153,000.
Right.
So you figure a percentage there, that's 55%. Somebody else's assessment goes up 20%. So now you're taking all the assessments and what they did, and you're going to average them, and that's going to determine whether your taxes go up, go down, stay the same, correct?
It depends how much you went up, yeah, how much your assessment.
Exactly, but it
Right.
depends on what the average is according to New York State, because it's right here in the papers.
Yeah, I think that's, you're conflating two issues.
Well, it says right here, if your assessment increases, it doesn't mean that your taxes will automatically increase. If the increase in your assessment is less than the average increase, your taxes will actually decrease. If your assessment increase is 12% and the average assessment is 15%, then your taxes will decrease. And that's assuming school and that, I'm
That's
talking about
yeah, that's
city.
an example.
That's
not-
exactly, that's an example, but I'm asking, what is the average increase, or what was the average assessment increase for the city? You should know that. You did all the assessments, or somebody did them all. We got them, everybody got them. So if we're trying to figure out where our taxes are, we need that number.
Yeah.
But we need it supplied by somebody,
You
and I
would-
guess you're it.
Yeah, well, the recurring theme. You don't know what that is yet. Nobody will know what that is, because the total taxable value for the total city has yet to be established. So there's no way to know that. There's also no way to know that in terms of what the budgets or the levies, because those are not established. What I can say is that the old assessment, total taxable value, and the new value, there was a change of 58%. 58. So even if you were, so What that illustrates, in essence, is that your equalization rate of 83 was not accurate. In other words, you had some people that were overassessed, and you had some people that were underassessed.
Well, I understand that from what
Right.
Kevin just said. Some people are 30%,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying.
But, so my point is that I'm not, there's no way to know that of what the taxes are. What I can tell you is that that break-even point, that if you went up, if everything stayed the same, the tax impact disclosure notice with the hypothetical illustration, the way that that was calculated, is taking all the old levies in the budgets, the knowns, we know what they are, we know what the rates are, from the previous year, and we're saying, okay, here's the old taxable value. Here's the new preliminary taxable value. And what it will do is calculate a new rate. If everything was set, if a snapshot in time. So in other words, if you should see on your disclosure notice a general idea of what your taxes may or may not go. But
I saw
the
it.
reason why I'm saying it may or may not is because we don't know what the total taxable value would be, because the final roll's not filed till July 1st, and we also don't know what the budget is.
So our personal budgets won't be able to be put in place until after you guys decide that, which will be July 1st, correct? That's when we'll have an average, and we'll know why our taxes went up, stayed the same, or decreased. Is that it?
Correct, yes.
Okay, all right. I guess it's a question for you.
Okay.
What is aid for cyclical reassessments, and how is eligibility determined? Because that's the only place that I saw the state makes any reference to 100% assessment, and is that what this was for? I guess that was for Kevin. So I got two questions, one for you, one for
No,
Kevin.
the purpose of the project was to correct the inequity between the levels of assessment
Okay.
and to properly distribute the tax burden. The aid was just something that we could apply for to help pay for the cost of the revaluation.
Right, which
So-
means that we get reassessed every 4 years, according to the state, correct?
Yep, the cyclical reassessment aid, that's typically what it's meant for. This is the New York State Assessors Association. They recommend data collection every 4 to 6 years. So the cyclical aid, the way it's written out is that a city would do a reassessment project, like the city of Oswego did this year, and in between years, there would be a plan for in another 4 to 6 years to take a look and reassess. The state aid that the city of Oswego has applied for, or will apply for this year, would be given, right after this cycle is done. So if a city ever decided to back out of the cyclical aid, the state doesn't hold them accountable. We wouldn't take the aid back. So even though it is a cyclical plan in the future, that's what, at a state level, we feel is best, is once a town or a city has done a reassessment, to cyclically do that every 4 to 6 years, to take a look and make sure that you're still at 100%. But if a city decided not to do that, we don't take the state aid back, there's nothing.
Okay, so once
holding-
we're in it, we don't have to continue with it, correct?
Correct.
Okay, all right. I guess that's a question for Gar. Did you guys walk around each property? And if you did, what code for the property was used in your reassessment, and how was that determined? And if you did not walk around, how was the property code determined? Also, what criteria was used? Square footage, age of the house, neighborhood, amount of stories, outside appearance, and recent improvements, correct? That's all that you used?
Yeah, we did not walk around the property. We used satellite imagery. We also were on site from the right-of-way taking pictures. The property codes that were established were in accordance with the data collection manual, which is dictated in real property tax law. So in other words, if it's a two-family, it's a 220. If it's a single-family residential, it's a 210. 4 units and above is deemed commercial property. So we adhere to all of the rules and regulations that are dictated by real property tax law.
And just to add to that, our office, how we monitor the project, part of what we did, I personally, along with one of my coworkers, we did take a selection after GAR had let us know that they were done with all the data collection and that all the data was correct on their file. We did get a copy of the file. We randomly selected about 50 parcels, and I personally did come to the city of Oswego and drive up and down the street. I met with you that day, Kevin, last year. And, you know, we just took a random selection of parcels where we took a look, we took a picture of the property, we had all the information from GAR, and we checked off that they did have all the correct, and overall, we did find that it was accurate, just based on the small sample of parcels that we did look at.
Well, I don't know who puts the pictures in, like, when you go to the real property page, and I don't have a picture of my house there, so.
Yeah, those pictures are contained in the state's RPS system, but for some reason, the ImageMate County, it's kind of the public-facing side of that system, are showing old photos, but the new ones are in the system, and we just have to get those updated.
Which
so they
brings me
reflect.
to the county, since I'm there. I was doing comparables, and there's 17 pages of comparables for my house. I got to page 10, went to page 11, and I got this big notice that there was a server error. So I called up the county today. The guy went in and hit the same problem. So do you guys have any intentions to fix that? He said the program was kind of iffy if it gets overheated, I guess. I guess we overheated it. So I want to know, I'm 7 pages shy of trying to compare my property, but I can't get the comparisons.
Okay. So the website's provided by Systems Development Group, so we can open a ticket with them to look into why that's happening for your property. You probably spoke to, did you know who you spoke to? Was it David?
He didn't give a name.
Okay.
So.
It was most likely David you spoke to, and he did give me that information on your parcel, and I think I passed it along to STG today.
Oh, okay, that's cool. The one other thing about the lots, I don't know what you guys know about code, but a 33 by 100 foot lot, if you have a house on it and it burns down, you have to use 3/4 of the present foundation, I believe, according to code, to build that house up. But if you take the house down and you have a yard, you can't sell that. And most of the properties that I've come in contact with that were 33-foot lots went from $3,000 to $18,000. You can sell that lot for $18,000, but with all the variances and setbacks that you've got to use, you can build yourself a 15-foot house. You're better off going to the country and getting a mobile home. So, I mean, some of those assessments were way out of whack as far as what can people do with an 18, with a 33-foot lot. I mean, maybe when you're doing the assessments, you might want to check with code to find out if there's really any use for them, because at this point, there's not much use for it. But anyway, something to think about. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Bill. All right, next we have Cindy Snyder at 43 Eisenhower Ave.
I came to the Common Council meeting last Monday, and I had a question, and I didn't get an answer. So I'd like to start with that. You said you sent out surveys to all the property owners last fall, and I believe you mentioned there were like 6,000-something properties when we had the meeting last Monday. Okay, so of all the surveys that you sent out, what percentage actually came back to you with changes or upgrades to the information?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know.
Okay, so if there was 6,000-something surveys, did at least 3,000 come back with changes to their information?
I don't think it was that many. No, typically, in most projects, we see about 10 or 15%.
10 or 15%?
Yeah. But
Okay.
I can confirm that number, but yeah, that's sort of customary, typical.
Okay, so you are basing your reassessment evaluations on the information that was already in the Oswego County Real Property Tax Database?
That's inaccurate. No, what we did was we verified that information. So we did make changes prior to mailing out a populated survey.
Okay, so if people didn't upgrade or make changes to their information that was already there in the already populated forms that you sent everybody, and yet there were improvements made, then you don't know that, if only about 15% sent back their survey.
Yeah. What I'm saying is if there were improvements made to the property in our verification process, we would have collected that. So in other words, if someone put an addition on, and we were either through a building permit or even non-permitted, and one of the benefits of doing aerial imagery is being able to capture those. The intention of the populated survey is that if for some reason we had counted area that's living space that's not, we ask property owners to let us know. It's just as an example. If there's square footage errors or bedroom bathroom counts. But our changes in our inventory was collected in the verification project and not contingent on returned surveys.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, but that's on the outside of a property. You have no idea what's on the inside of a residence. You have no idea if 3 bedrooms went to 2, or a kitchen's been newly put in, or whatever. Just looking around at the different properties since I got my letter, on my street, there's a parcel known as 79 Eisenhower Ave. In the database of the Oswego County Real Property Database, it's showing a 2-family duplex on 79 Eisenhower Ave with a picture of it. And there was a 2-family duplex on this property. But about 5 years ago, there was a fire and the house burned, and it has since been demolished. It's been demolished for quite a while, and it's an empty lot now. However, in the database, it's showing an assessment going from 88.6 to 109 for that house.
Yeah. Very good.
Okay? So I don't think a lot of the information that was used from the database is accurate because it's not up to date. And as Kevin just said, a lot of the photographs are not up to date of the houses that are in the city. I want to give another example.
If I may, just with that,
Okay.
we launched a website at cityofoswego.prosgar.com. So I think what you're speaking of is the county website. There's a website that's dedicated to this project. That's the cityofoswego.prosgar.com. I don't know if you've been on that, but you keep
I haven't.
referencing. Right, so I just want to caution you because there may be more up-to-date information in our dedicated website for this project than the
Okay.
county.
Okay. But are you saying on your website that you have photographs of every residence in the city that's an up-to-date current photograph and up-to-date information on the square footage, number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms?
Whatever we have on file, it will be on that pros website.
Okay, but where did you get the data if only 15% of the people returned their surveys?
Ma'am, we took pictures of every property that we had access to. We also updated, as I mentioned, in phase 1, we did data verification. So that means looking at every parcel, collecting every parcel, and whatever we collected, we put on file on the RPS database system, which should be synonymous with the PROS site. Further than that, we mailed out a populated survey.
Right.
Whatever the percentage is, and I'll get confirmation as to what that percentage is, if there were changes, that was made to the file. But I have to reiterate, we did data verification, meaning we looked at every parcel. More to the point, too, is that the state did a collection, a recollect, of a sample of the properties as well.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, but people do not let assessors or anybody usually in their house to see what the inside of the house looks like. So if you don't have current data from people that made changes to their surveys, then you probably don't have accurate information. And may I continue? I want to point out another property. This property's on 119 West 4th Street on the west side of the city. This is a one-family residence, and it's a well-known house because it was owned by a college professor from SUNY Oswego. It was known as the Gingerbread House. This house was sold in the year 2020 for $50,500 because since she passed away, it had fallen on a little hard times. So after it was purchased, it's been renovated. And the database, the county database, is still showing one-family residence, 4-bedroom, 1.5 bath, 2,033 square feet. And the assessment on the county database is showing it going from 50,000 to 153,000. However, this property has been totally renovated by a local contractor, and it's being shown as an Airbnb, as a 4-bedroom, 3 full bath, totally remodeled house with original architecture and original woodwork inside. So in other words, that house is pretty much like a brand-new house. So the assessment as shown on the county is going from 50,000 to 153. I want to compare this with my house. My house is a small 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath, raised ranch. I try to keep it up so it looks nice. My assessment is going from 110 to 181. I haven't recently renovated my whole house. So my assessment on my little house is at 181, but this 4-bedroom, 3-bath, pretty much brand-new house, because it's been totally renovated, is only being assessed at 153. I think there's something wrong with that picture.
Again, I would urge you to go to the pros site that's established, because then you're comparing the most recent information, and I can't speak to that specific case. But that's something certainly that part of the informal review process, if in fact the numbers that you're speaking of, and that's a consideration that we would take under advisement, and if we needed to make an adjustment, that's our recommendation to the assessor.
Okay, I guess my point I'm trying to make here is that if you don't have accurate information on inventory improvements, et cetera, square footage in houses, you're looking at the outside, yes. But that's why these property values that have been given on a lot of the properties that are family residences are unrealistic for this city.
Okay, Gary Thompson on Hart Street.
Good evening. First, I'd like to say, out of the city population, 99% of the population is upset about this, and you want to single me out. I understand that. I understand how you feel. That's how the Hannibal Fire Department felt, too. Since you want to accuse me of misinformation, let me spread a little fact that you provided for the city. So, we had 2,200 residents facing a hypothetical tax increase of 25% or more. Now, who has lived in their houses more than 27 years since the last citywide reval? Our senior citizens, the most. So we had 2,200 residents facing 25% tax increase or more. That's devastating, right? Then we got another 900 residents or so facing 10 to 25% tax increase. That right there is a real burden. But on the other hand, according to the charts provided by the city, we have 82% of commercial properties hypothetically are going to see a tax cut. 17.33%, which equals to 92% commercial properties, are going to see a tax cut of 25% or more. So your Walmarts, your Burger Kings, your big box stores are going to see 25% more tax cuts. While on the other side, we're putting our seniors on the streets. Also, 50.66% of commercial properties, which equals out to 269 individual commercial properties, are going to see a tax decrease of 10% to 25%. And on the other side, people are getting taxed out of their homes. Then you're going to see another 99 commercial properties, 18.64%, stay about the same or see about 10% cut. So my question for all of you up here, respectfully, is how is this equal if our commercial properties are making out like bandits, according to your charts, and our seniors are facing $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 tax increases? I'll be honest with you, Kevin, we've been out, we've talked to 1,000 people, we've seen their bills, you know, their hypothetical bills. It's heartbreaking, man. I had a guy, 83-year-old guy on Draper Street. He says, I get $10,000 a year in Social Security, and this city wants $5,000 more from me, hypothetically.
Did you send him to City Hall so we could take a look to verify that the value is correct? If there's anything we can do, if there are exemptions available? No, instead we're walking around asking them to sign a petition that can't actually be enacted. So if people would stop with the distractions and focus on the actual notice and all of the remedies available to them, I will sit down with every single person, look at the numbers, make sure they're accurate. Here's the problem. We have a job to assess the property according to its value. If the tax burden that's placed on people by the city is the problem, or the county, or the school district, this is not the group that is responsible for that. And the fact that businesses were carrying a heavier burden of the taxes because they were overassessed is not something that you should be, you know, demonizing. Business owners live in the city, they pay property taxes in the city, they generate sales tax. Our sales tax numbers have been off the charts the past few years. That's because of the businesses. That lowers the requirement for property tax increases. So it's a balancing act. You have to look at all the components, and businesses are very important. If you want to bring in the 50% of the city who have zero tax impact or their taxes are going down as a result of this revaluation, and every business owner that's seeing a slight tax reduction up to a moderate tax reduction, and tell them, what we want to do is keep everything the same. We're going to tax you more than you reasonably should be based on the fair market value assessment. If you think that that's a reasonable ask, what is that based on? Where's the logic? How is it fair that they be taxed at a proportionally higher level than they should be? That's what you're asking for.
Well,
and unfortunately in this job, we have to assess properly. The values have to be accurate. If they're wrong, we fix them. I understand individual people have questions about their number. Come in, we will look at it. If it's wrong, we'll fix it. But to continue, you know, this charade of you know, demonizing the process, get them in the office, bring them in. We'll help them. We'll do whatever we can. There's programs, exemptions. So I don't understand the narrative that you're putting out there. There are business owners in the audience right now. If I said to them, should you be paying more than your fair share, what do you think they're going to say? Yes, I'm happy to pay more than I should? Nobody wants to. But we're also failing to recognize the fact that low assessments that were too low, those individuals were paying a disproportionately low amount of taxes for a very long time. So there was an accumulated benefit that they saw from those low values. Nobody's talking about that. We're not asking for that back.
So how does
it's a balancing act.
How
Gary.
does the value of commercial property drop, but the
Because
value
they
of
were already
residential
assessed at a higher
property
level.
goes through the roof?
They were already assessed at a higher level, and the market trends were much lower on commercial versus residential.
And a matter of fact, all commercial property owners do not live in the city.
I'm not saying they all do, Gary.
the
I'm
owner of
saying they
Walmart
do,
lives
though.
in the city, or the owner of
But a
Burger
lot of
King or
them do.
Price Chopper.
A lot of them do.
I was
So,
just going to say, when Corey did her presentation, that was part of what she showed when, okay, yeah. Do you want me to continue? Yeah. When an appraiser or an assessor puts a value on a property, they're looking at sales to see actual sales from the city of Oswego, how much similar properties sell for. And as Corey showed the past few years of trends, that's taking a look at the sales, and it was showing that, like in 2022, residential properties were selling for about 10% more than they were the year before. Commercial properties that same year, they were only selling for 3% more. In 2023, residential properties were selling for 12% more than the year before. Commercial was only selling for 4% more. So that is part of it, that when an assessed value is placed on a parcel, you know, it's based on how much they're selling for, and it is evident that in the city of Oswego the past few years that residential sales were much higher compared to the commercial sales or commercial income approach of value as well.
No, utilities
That's a
are
utility.
different. Yeah, utilities were handled totally separately. Yeah. Next person is Ben Richardson, 20 Burden Drive.
Good evening, members of the panel, mayor, assorted common councilors that are in the room. I'm Ben Richardson. I am a local econ and government and business teacher. Some of you have already met me. My assessment, like many other people's, jumped significantly. I'm not here to speak against the process or how it's all laid out per se. I think everyone in here, and there have been many better examples than I have gone into depth about their individual assessments. And I think that the trend that we see here is there is a level of inconsistency that regardless of where the data and whatever due diligence was done, it is starting to pile up. And what I think that the panel needs to consider is that you have provided us a timeline and a means to address each one of these, so that I have an informal, a formal, a legal way that I can address the fact that my home market value is significantly lower than other homes in the area, yet they're assessed lower. Okay, that's my individual take. Is there enough time for that? This group of people here is clearly just a representative number of the people who obviously are not going to be happy and going to bring up their individual issues. I don't admire your schedule in the next 6 months. So is it clear to everyone what the process is and how they can do this so that they understand it walking in the door? And have we allotted the time necessary for them to actually do that, to smooth out this process and get rid of those inconsistencies? I guess the thing that I want to emphasize is this is our city's process. We're in control of this. So if we need to make adjustments, that's fine. We don't need to necessarily change it. But where we have wiggle room, we need to find it. Because I think a lot of people here are feeling like they're up against a time schedule. They feel like they're up against the system, per se. And I know that's not your intent. You obviously are doing this as a means of what is supposed to be done. But that needs to be projected. And where there is the space and time to figure out, to give you more time to make this right, you need to do that. And I also want to emphasize, I started with the process. Well, this process also presents us with an opportunity. A lot of people have been talking about the large amount of economic development that's due to happen in central New York. And we're on the outside edge of that. And this assessment isn't necessarily related to that. But over the next 10 years, that development and that population growth is going to accelerate this very process. And what we don't want to become captured in is that, well, we see it all over the press, this gentrification process that ends up driving up property values, higher taxes, higher property values, higher taxes, higher property values, and all of a sudden our low to moderate income people are forced out of the city, and the entire nature of the city changes. Why not use this moment to start the planning process now before it gets out of control so that we manage that growth and get all the benefits of the economic growth and preserve our city the way we want it? Thank you.
So just one clarification. The state actually prescribes the timeline on the formal grievance process, tentative role establishment, formal grievance day, fourth Tuesday in May, and then the final roll on July 1st. The only real change from the normal annual process in the past, and I'm not entirely clear how the city was assessed in the past. There's no real clear indication, but if an entire neighborhood was done, that neighborhood would have the same rights prescribed to them under state law that as far as tentative roll, grievance day, final roll. The reason we have this additional review period is because of the revaluation, so that extra 1 month, really 1 month, probably slightly flexible, 1 month of extra time is to accommodate for the reassessment. So most of the process is dictated by the state, so we don't have a lot of flexibility there, but we do have that extra review. Next, Dan Bozick on Draper Street.
My question was already answered.
Okay, thank you. Next, Taryn Mosier, 25 Draper Street. You're good? Thank you. Next one, Jeff Ballins from the 7th Ward.
Ben, I like what you said. I have a few notes here. The most important thing I heard was from you, Kevin. You said something along these lines, that the reassessment is not an effort to raise taxes, i.e., not a tax grab. I've lived here since 1986, only once had questions about my assessment in 2008. They were addressed by the assessor to my satisfaction. I'm retired. Just got in last night at 2 in the morning with my wife and was forewarned by my neighbor, go through your mail and find this letter. I got it, and mine was the same as his, an 83% increase in the assessed value. I came here tonight with my wife basically to see if this panel was qualified to be doing the work that they're doing. Because I thought, I've been here since '86, never seen anything like this. So very concerned about what's going on, as are my neighbors. All prior reassessments all resulted in increases and were reflected in the proportionate tax increase to city, county, and school taxes. That's what we understand living here in Oswego. So I ask of the people here, have you heard enough tonight to have confidence that this is not going to be a tax grab? No. If so, would you please raise your hand if you feel confident? No. So, Kevin, clearly, what you're facing is a lack of trust. I've lived here since '86, never had a lack of trust. Everybody here has a lack of trust. To the point, and I've never heard of this before either, neighbors are pursuing legal action against Oswego because of their assessment. And that number is growing, and that to me is really disturbing. I appreciate, Kevin, that you feel that this effort is not going to raise our city, county, and school tax. My assessment is so high, I would sell it for that assessment in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat. I would like you all who did presentations, I don't know if you would care to join in, but to, in a first step, to reestablish yourself and your team as being trustworthy, I would like you to each tell us how long you have been in your current profession and level of profession, and how long have you been in that capacity, and how long you have lived in Oswego County to understand how things work here. We want to know that you four are vested in this community, because I don't have that confidence. Thank you.
Next, Chris Fragel, 95 West Utica. Oh, you want me, oh, okay. I was born in Oswego, 1982, Oswego Hospital. My grandmother, Marion Hill, was a nurse at Oswego Hospital. I lived in Oswego through the town of Oswego when I was growing up. In the city of Oswego for high school, went to Oswego High School. Ben's wife was my social studies teacher. I went to college at Ithaca College for music, finance, and pursued a master's degree in business. Moved to Albany, New York, worked for the state of New York in a similar capacity for 7 years. Returned to Oswego, New York to partner in my family's business, which is right near the Old Stones Candy, where I was for 10 years. Concurrent with that time, I was on the city council for 6 years. After 10 years, I applied for and was appointed to this position. I have pursued and completed about 80%. No. I've been the assessor for about 6 months now, but I've already completed in that time 80% of the required state certification. I have been in similar capacities. The state actually gives you 3 years to receive that certification. So, but I've completed 80% of it in about 5 months. And I will expect to have it completed within my first year. I am currently also on the county legislature. I am incredibly invested in the community. I know almost every person in this room. I have supported and have been involved in almost everything in this community. I have a stake. We own a business. Our assessment over the past 4 years on a very small business on Bridge Street in a, what might consider a pretty raucous college area, went up $95,000. I understand. I recognize. I am with you. I understand it. But I also know that due to decades of unequal assessments, arbitrary changes, various things that, it accumulates over time. And it led to an assessment structure that was not fair. And, we can point fingers.
I don't know many people
Yep.
complaining at the level they are.
Because it was a system that was benefiting approximately 50% of the city, who were being subsidized by about 25% of the city, and business owners. So, yes, I understand. It was a much better scenario for most people in the city, and nobody wanted to say a word. But there are still a significant number of people who are being disproportionately taxed, and this process was brought into place to correct those disparities, correct the inequity, and try to bring fair assessments to everyone. So we knew this would be controversial. We knew the meetings would be like this. So, why now? You asked the question. I'm trying to give a thorough and thoughtful answer, and you're dismissing it. But so the point is very invested in the community, care about every person in this room, and you. Fine.
Thank you. I've worked for New York State Office of Real Property Tax Services for 17 years. Our office is in Syracuse. So I apologize. I can't answer as well as Kevin or perhaps Corey can when it comes to Oswego. I was just hoping to be able to offer you guys some answers to questions generally with reassessment projects. Turn it over to you, Dave.
Okay. I've been with GAR for over 20 years. I'm a New York State Certified General Appraiser. I'm designated, I have a dual designation through the Appraisal Institute, MAI and SRA. I'm a member of the New York State Assessors Association as well as the International Assessment Officers. Done projects across New York State from the city of Buffalo to the city of Troy to a 1,000 parcel town in Columbia County, if you know where that is. But there's really no area that we haven't been in New York State. What I will say is your concern about whether I know Oswego and I know Oswego County, while I think we offer an element of objectivity being from the outside, this is our area of expertise. I also know a lot more than I want to know about some of the people in this room in the city of Oswego through the project. I don't ask for this information, but they seem to tell me. I think along with collaborating with the assessment office, with all due respect to the Office of Real Property Tax Services, there's an element of oversight. There are uniform standards of professional practice, USPAP, specifically Standard 6, that we have to follow, along with the conjunction with the relationship with the county. This is really, in essence, a team effort. I've been doing this a long time. I've worked in a lot of communities similar to this, and I do recognize, some of the concerns. Anytime, anywhere, whenever there's the R word, the reassessment project, there's immediate apprehension because people automatically think about tax liability. Our role, as I've stated a couple times, is to make sure that we can get your value correct. And that's our goal. That's my goal on any project. And to date, we've been successful in every project that we've conducted, that the state of New York has certified our projects at 100%.
Do you live in Oswego County?
No, but I've performed reassessment projects in Oswego County.
Where do you live?
I live in Saratoga County, but I go back and forth and make the trip.
Do you agree that if, in terms of Kevin's statement, that this is not a tax grab, what should the average change in assessment be across the county?
Well, across the county, as Corey displayed, they're at varying degrees of equalization rate.
Okay, but what should it ultimately be?
Well, ultimately, everybody
We're
should,
not gonna have the tax.
ultimately, everybody should be at 100.
No, if this is not gonna be resulting in an increase in taxes for city, county, and school, what is the average? Some will go up, some will go down, but what will the average?
Are you saying the average of the
For
increase?
an
Yeah.
engineer, goodness, it's gonna be zero.
What I think,
50,
the-
what was it, 8%?
the point is that it's revenue neutral.
We're not on the same page here.
That we are. It's revenue neutral. So in other words, this is spreading the tax liability out amongst property owners. There is no increase. There's no increase in tax revenue. So from an engineering standpoint, the pie has gotten bigger, meaning so people's slice of the pie has gotten smaller. Some have stayed the same, and some have gotten bigger. But there's no additional tax revenue dollars gained.
The decisions for those questions are sitting along the wall right there. Those are the people who decide whether those numbers go up, go down, or stay the same. And all we do is distribute that number over the value. And it's the same with the county, same with the school. The legislative and executive components of those entities determine their budgets. That gets distributed over the taxable assessed value. That's what determines whether it goes up or down. So we really have nothing to do with the amount that is spent. It's simply the distribution of that amount.
So do you all understand now why you've lost the trust of this community? What's the number one reason?
I honestly don't know how to answer that question.
I do. I've lived here 38 years. This has never been an issue.
Because we
would get
weren't doing.
increases, and we would get increases, and we would pay the increases as responsible citizens, not an 83% increase.
Well, there was a projected 90-something percent increase or 80-something percent increase in tax that caused a very similar response that was later reduced. So there have been recent instances of similar things. But again, this has absolutely nothing to do with the amount that the city spends. It's simply the value of each property within the city and then the distribution of the spending. So that's all.
What's the school gonna do with it?
We don't know. We don't know, but that's our job to ensure that they don't squander the value. I mean, we have a responsibility to do that. So, not as assessor. That's not my job as assessor. It's my job as a citizen in the community. We have an obligation to monitor that stuff. That's our job. So, and to keep them.
And you have an obligation to instill trust to this community that you know what you're doing.
And I would stand behind my reputation all day long. And I would hope that a lot of the people in this room would also, but.
You want me to go? Sure. Yeah, I'd rather move on, but if you'd like to know, I've lived in Oswego County for 34 years. I've lived in the town of Scriba for 34 years. I have worked in that office for 9 years. I started as a typist, worked my way up to being director of the department, which I've been for the last 3 years. I have produced every county, village, school tax bill for the last 6 years. I think I would hope that the words that I said earlier would have instilled that trust, that this was not a tax grab. I would like to address the actual letters that were received, the impact notices. Typically, those are produced by my office. In fact, I have produced those for every reassessment project, I think in the last 6 or 7 years. And it really does take the tax levies that are known from last year, recalculates new tax rates to show what the projected tax shift is. For every dollar that somebody increased, somebody decreased that dollar. It's not increasing taxes. It may increase taxes for you. It may increase taxes for specific people that were underassessed, that were not paying their fair share of taxes before, but it is not creating new tax revenue. Now, if the county, the city, the school increase their tax levies, then yes, you will be paying more in taxes as a whole, as a city, but it is not automatically an increase in taxes because the assessment went up. The tax levy is the pie. The assessments are individual pieces. Every time a piece gets bigger, everyone gets a little smaller. Every time somebody gets smaller, all the pieces get a little bit bigger. That size of that pie is controlled by the taxing districts. It's controlled by the county legislature, your city council, the school board. If they want to raise taxes, if they want to raise their tax levy, then yes, the taxes go up for everyone. If the tax levy goes down, the pie gets smaller, everyone's taxes go down. As a whole, as a city, individual people, individual assessments determine the size of your pie, and if you went up a disproportionately high amount, it means that you were underassessed. It means that you were not reflective of your market value before. That's really as simple as that. The assessments are based on market value. If you disagree with your assessment and you think your assessment doesn't reflect the market value, look at sales, find sales that are lower than yours, and use that as your evidence in the informals or in the grievance process. There's plenty of avenues available to challenge this.
Next, Chris Frigel, 95 West Utica. No? Okay. Jason, 113 East 7th.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. All right. Hello. A lot of people here today. All right. My name is Jason Shi. I own One Zone Calzone, a local business in town, the best Chinese calzone ever, by the way. So the reason I'm here today is I do own 4 properties in town, and my tax went up from 200% to 300% in assessment value. From 2 properties on each side, 52 East 4th Street and 50 East 4th Street, from $63,000 to $183,000. So you guys shouldn't be, you know what I mean? That's like 3 times the assessment value. So 2 of them double, 2 of them triple. I understand that the city, in the past, should have increased them, gradually. I can take it 25% increase. In 6 years, if you increase 25% every year, in 6 years, you double it. Now, it's difficult to, actually, I'd say landlords don't really matter. Landlords can always walk because no big deal. Business owner, I'm talking to, realtors right now, see if we just, I take half. I'm very happy to take the half the value. $183,000, you can write it down, 50 East 4th Street and 52 East 4th Street. If I can get 90, I'm a happy man. All right, so and 183 is quite a bit, you know, it's just, like for business or landlord, it don't really matter, you know, they can always walk, no big deal. But what about people like my boy Brandon, you know, on disability? You know, you want to increase in 50, average of 58%. And extra what, how much you paying? Extra what?
Let's see, they bought my property 3 years ago. They went from 70,000 to 127, just like that. I was told I had 2 years to put it into it. They did the same year in 2020. The young lady over here actually helped me fill out my grievance for them. Now I just got reassessed for $170,000. And right now, being out of work, Ubering, with my medical disabilities, I can't even afford my mortgage.
You know, it's a for average folks, you know, that way it boils down to average folks. And I see a lot of landlords up there. We all can walk, but what about the average folks? You know, I've been here for I go to school in Oswego 2001. I've been here for, I don't know, how many, 23 years now? It's been a while. I consider myself Oswegonian. But my both kids are born in Oswego. I think that guard assessment, it's not even close. You know, double and triple. I understand certain properties, a lot of properties are underpaying for a year, but I think that more a gradual approach. You know, 25% increase, 6 years, we got that same value instead of 200 and 300%. Yeah, that's my concern. You know, it's okay, but you know, as I said, it's no biggie. But it's just my opinion. Thank you, guys.
John Shaver? I think he left, okay. Tricia Woodward? I think she left too. Sean and Beth Theret? You all set? Okay. Mary Kay Donovan?
Hello. Thank you for all your support and whatnot, but my main questions, a lot of my questions have already been answered, but one of my main concerns was how I was wondering how a property could be assessed without going inside the home, because it may look great on the outside, but on the inside there may be a lot of updates to be added. But one of my main concerns are for the senior citizens. I worked for seniors most of my life. I'm retired. My husband's retired. And what about those people that aren't here tonight? And now I have a better understanding of how everything was done. And also, Kevin, you are volunteering to give your time. So how are you going to get that information out to seniors or other people, especially on fixed incomes, that won't know what to do? Because a lot of people, their kids have moved away, and they don't have anybody to help them. So what can be done to let the entire community know in a week and a half, with Easter coming and preparations, how we're going to help them? And also, I think I was also concerned about when a senior citizen, let's say there's a retired couple on a fixed income, a spouse passes away, they lose that Social Security of the spouse that passed, and a lot of them don't know about the supplemental assistance that they can get. So I think in the community, we could do a better job of giving people the answers. So thank you. And thank you for everybody who spoke.
I'd like to make a point about the senior exemption that's available through county, city, and school. 2 years ago, the county mailed out 38,000 postcards to every residential property. You may have gotten one when you weren't a senior, letting you know that there is such an exemption available for people on low incomes. And this year, we sent that more targeted to people that are over 65, using one of the state reports on income. And a notice appears on every tax bill that this exemption exists. So I do think that as far as getting information about the exemption out there, I think we've done a good job of that. I think forums like this get that information out to people. Local news, who has left already. Would be wonderful to get that information out to senior citizens. I know that the Office for the Aging at the county does a great job trying to get that information out as well. And I'd like to commend Kevin for being so willing to take these people and help them through this process. I'd like to point out with the grievance specifically, you don't have just a couple of weeks. The grievance is in May, fourth Tuesday in May. The informal process through GAR is optional. And if you choose just to go straight to the Board of Assessment Review, you're welcome to do that. I would recommend going through the informal process because then you're talking to the people that actually came up with the values. But that grievance process, you do not need to appear in person. You can fill out the form and just mail it in. And then the bar has to rule on every application that was submitted. So if you just mail in with the information, they can make a determination on whether to reduce an assessment without you even having to be present. So that's an option for a lot of seniors that might not be able to make it. If they can fill out the application and at least mail it in, they'll have an opportunity to have administrative review of their assessment undertaken.
All right, next, Shannon Ladd.
Yeah, I moved to Oswego, 2017, bought a house that was burned up. They were going to tear it down or whatever, rebuilt it. But I've noticed in the area, I live on the east side, there was a lot of revitalization going on. People put money into their property and stuff. And I used to be a contractor, and what I see is if you institute this right bang, wide open, all that's going to stop. And you'll end up like the north side on Syracuse, because I used to work over there. And that's about it. You've answered a lot of the questions I wanted.
Thank you. Chelsea Ladd? No? Okay. Rich Clark? No? Connie Cosmento?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm going to read something short so I stay on topic. Be short. I'm Connie Cosmento. I live at 95 West Cuga Street, which for your general vision is a block behind a burned dairy across from the hospital. We have a cobblestone house, which I wish I wouldn't have bought. Our reassessment went from $88,000 in 2023 to $179,000 in 2024. And would I like my home to be worth $179,000? Absolutely. Does the city need a reassessment? Yes. I don't disagree with any of that, but the reality of being able to sell our home at this price is highly unlikely. And this reason is a topic that hasn't been addressed during the public forums to my knowledge, and that topic I would like to speak to is neighborhood decline. Every neighborhood has a unique challenge, and I'm very knowledgeable of my neighborhood. I was city alderman in 1994, city clerk from 95 through 99, 1995 to 1999, and councilor of the first ward, which I live in, from 2006 through 2011. I'm from Oswego, but we bought our house at 95 West Cuga Street in 1989. At that time, all of the homes were owner-occupied. Today, 2 homes, my next-door neighbor and me, are the last of the owner-occupied properties. The 4 homes on the opposite side of the block, on the south side of the street, which would have been Kevin's old ward, are all rentals. The home on the north side of our property, which would be 7th and Cuga, across from St. Mary's, is a rental. Then the 2 owner-occupied homes, and the one on my west, which is vacant, has been vacant for 10 years and out of code. Additionally, all the homes on the south side of Cuga Street between 6th and 7th are now rental. 2 of the 4 properties on West Cuga between 8th and 9th are rental. The north-south streets are almost 90% rental. During my tenure as counselor, the increase in the rental properties became prominent. I was able to get copies of the Sanborn maps and did a real property search on each property in the first ward, few on the third, and color-coded each property where rental properties were red, owner-occupied were blue, city, industrial, and non-taxable, and had identifying colors as well. At the end of my last term, the last day, December 31st, 2011, the percentage of rental properties in the first ward of all the parcels of owner-occupied properties was 62%. Research reports that neighborhoods that reach 25 percentile are beginning decline. That map was then posted in the city assessor's office, and the number of rentals from 2011 to present has decreased dramatically. I don't know if that map is still around. Sue Derry had it.
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
2006, Layton Elementary School announced that it was considering closing as a result of the declining student population. The number of college student rentals had indeed affected the number of students in that school district, for college students typically do not have children in school. Fortunately, the citizens were able to convince the school board to continue use of that building. However, it may not be that stable. And the plague of rental properties continues to affect properties to sell at market value, especially in the western portion, the western half of the first ward. If you were to move my house a block and a half to West Park, I wouldn't have any complaint. But that's the way it is. Parking, noise, especially on weekends and more commonly now weeknights. The rundown appearance of properties continues. When the elderly move into assistance living or pass their properties, they are often sold quickly and for less than market value, and we end up with more rentals. So I ask you, how did the condition of the were you made aware of the fact that some of these neighborhoods, I mean, I understand, I had a real estate license in Virginia. I understand that every neighborhood has a different and unique problem. But this is a serious problem for the city because it affects, I mean, the school was going to close. We would have lost teaching jobs. Children would have had to been relocated to other schools. People drive through now to look at properties for the sale, and they're not interested. Additionally, I do need to comment, I don't know how you get in touch with some of the people, the senior citizens that are still living in owner-occupied properties. They are older, they don't know they don't understand the process, they just think they're going to get whammied with taxes. So how do our counselors get in touch with seniors that are living in their wards and these properties that need help? Because these people don't understand. And, because I'll be talking with Kevin privately, but was the idea of declining properties a consideration in the evaluation of the homes?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly a consideration. However, all we can do is look at sales activity and sales transactions. So in that specific neighborhood, you know, that you're speaking of, maybe your neighborhood, but other neighborhoods within, you know, within the city, all we can do is look at sales that have transferred, arm's length transactions. But
Right.
certainly, there are always extenuating circumstances for us to consider as it relates to the property value. So therefore, I mean, that's kind of why we have this informal review process. You know, we do our best to get everything, whether there's external obsolescence or external influence, whether it's a commercial property or dilapidated properties, that's all something that can be part of the discussion in the informal review process.
'Cause I took a look at, I know how to get around on the real property database. In 2023, houses near me with the same number of bedrooms and bathrooms, 110, 103, 110, 119, 80,000. So, I mean, I'll be able to fill out the form, but I have very serious concerns about a declining neighborhood that is not stabilizing. Not your fault, I get that. But the city has some responsibility along with GAR, and sharing information, and I mean, our city is responsible to its constituents, which are all the citizens throughout the city. I get that. But this is a serious situation, especially when it's going to cost people to change their own quality of life. Thank you.
Next, we have Jim Tovey.
Hi, everybody. I've got audio visuals. I like to do my review of the whole process as I've seen, as I've gone through it. This is my house. This is my house. 8.5 Lathrop Street. It's 110 years old, and I'm the baby on the block. I'm the baby on the block. 110 years old. All the other houses were built in 18-something. I know because I looked it all up. So I know. I'm the baby on the block. My house has seen, 20 presidents, 2 pandemics, world wars, and everything. I'm in a, what you would call a transitional neighborhood, as you know.
Yes.
In our neighborhood, people, when I moved there 30 years ago, it was families and kids. We all knew each other. We all had parties together. We all went and watched the parade together, etc. Now, when people die, the properties are sold and it's turned into rental properties, because you can get $625, that's across the street from me, per bedroom for a rental. I have 2 rentals on my left, one straight across, another one down the street just a little ways. And then I get all the fun of being in a college neighborhood. Yeah, you know what that is. We had the naked guy who went to the house across the street from me, 2 old ladies, walked right into their house, thought it was his house. He was just down 2 houses as well. And I get the joys of the drunk bus coming through. I get the joys of every weekend chasing people for stealing my stuff on my lawn, because I'm sort of Hawaiian stuck and I have tiki torches like crazy out there. I'm always chasing the kids because they're stealing my tiki torches and running down the street with them. But anyways, this is my house. It was, after last year, it was $61,000, valued at $61,000. 110 years old, original plumbing, original wiring, haven't done a damn thing to it except put a new roof on it, which is now 14 years old. The siding is 40 years old, it was there before me. Now, you guys are telling me I'm $135,000. 125% increase. But yet, I'm lazy. I went on to websites to see, okay, if I wanted to sell my house, what can I get? Redfin says I'm only worth $104,000, not $135,000. Zillow says I'm worth $110,000, not $135,000. This is what they say I could sell it for. Trulia says I'm 111, so that's the high end of the area. So the closest we get is like 25,000 away from your numbers. 25,000 away from your numbers, if I wanted to sell it. And I don't. I finally paid off the mortgage 3 years ago. Don't want to go. I love it. I moved back to Oswego. I was born here, went to Florida, of all places, and then came back after high school. And here I am. But I'm being hit with this. What the heck is this? And I guess my only real question is, this is a nice graft of make sure I got it right now, yep. Of my house's value over 10 years. You guys decided to do the reassessment in 2022 after the pandemic. Notice the graph. There's the pandemic. Where's my house now? You're not going to get $135,000 for a 110-year-old house. Hell no. Hell no. That's me.
Brandon Walker? Okay. And that is everyone who's signed up. Anyone else? Okay. Yep, you can just step to the microphone. If you want to say your name and your address, that would be great.
I'm a little nervous, so bear with me here. Okay, my name is Joshua Davern. My address is 13 East 4th. I actually sat down and talked with you right after I received my letter from GAR. And I'm a researcher, so I always like to go through and make sure that all data is done correctly. My house was assessed at $42,000, and you guys reassessed it at $144,000. Mind you, I've done updates, okay? I have. The thing that really kills me is how accurate your data is, okay? Because I contacted your company and asked for my comparable sales and my comparable neighborhoods. The girl that I talked to actually chuckled a little bit, apologized to me because the data that you guys are using must seem funny to her, and told me that she apologized for what you guys are doing, and the powers to be are making it to where we have to go through this grievance process. To me, that just seems really weird that one of your employees would say that to me. So I got my comparable sales from you guys, and on this this sheet here, right, you guys sent me, it says 51 Fifth Street. Does anybody know where 51 Fifth Street is? Does anybody know where 120 10th Street is? How about 159th Street? What about 42 Fifth? Anybody? Do you know where those are?
Is there an SBL with those?
Oh, no, there is. But why would you guys send me data with incorrect addresses? Explain it.
You were talking about a specific parcel, sir. I don't know. But I can certainly look into it.
Okay, all right. So anyway, so hang on. So then I went in and I looked at all my comparables, okay? Every single one of them sold, so I was able to look inside through Zillow. Every single one of them was updated. They were modern. They were pretty well nice inside, They were very, very nice. My house inside is outdated. It has been since the 80s. That was the last time any renovations were actually done. I went through, I re-sided my house, put a new roof on, new windows, did a concrete slab, had an appraisal done, right? And my appraisal came back at $80,000. Where is $144,000 coming from?
Well, I would question, number one, when was the appraisal? That would be my first.
January of 2023.
Okay. That would be my first question. My second question would be, that's something that you could submit.
I already did.
Okay. And we'll take a look at that appraisal. And we'll look at and analyze the sales that were utilized.
I just feel like that there's more homes that are like mine, that your data is corrupting our neighborhoods and is going to force these people to have to pay higher taxes because they can't do what I'm doing.
Well, I can assure you I'm not looking to make anybody pay any more taxes than they should.
My question now to Kevin or the mayor, how much do we pay GAR for these assessments?
The total contract was $300,000
So we paid them $300,000?
to assess about 7,000.
To assess our properties?
To about
Okay.
7,000 parcels over a period of 2 years.
So of course, I actually did a little more research. I said, okay, I'm a conspiracy theorist. So I think somebody has to benefit from this, right? Somebody has to, right? I bought my house for $25,000 and have been paying a $42,000 assessment for the last 7 years. Explain it. Who is truly benefit?
realistically, a $42,000 number is not something that's.
No, listen,
that's
I know my
consistent in the
house
market
needs
now.
to be
Yeah,
reassessed,
yeah.
okay?
And if the
resided.
inside conditions.
My
will affect the
appraised value
value,
came back
when
at
you-
80,000, I get it.
If the inside condition needs to be reflected in the value, you submit that information, it gets adjusted. That's the whole point of.
I get it,
of all
but
these
what
different
about the people
processes.
that can't do what I'm doing?
I understand that. And anytime there is
Like,
a.
this is why this whole process, I mean, we paid this company $300,000 to pretty much screw the elderly and the people that can't do what I'm doing. I mean, thanks a lot, Mayor, councilors. Appreciate it. And mind you, let's look up 228 Dewar Street and 220 Dewar Street, plus all the other commercial properties that I seen that were, I don't know, they didn't really go up very much. Oh. So, I don't know, I guess I'm just really upset over this whole process that I actually have to do this with my city to try and get things fair and equitable for everybody around me. I mean, my neighbor on the corner, his house came in at 190,000 plus you assessed his land at 50. I mean, it's crazy. I came here with a guy that lives in a double wide trailer that you guys listed as a ranch. And
we fixed
I
that.
mean, come on, where's the data? Where's the data? I want to see all the data.
It's all there.
Yep.
Go on the website.
Everything's there.
How
Yeah?
come Oswego never had these problems before?
Now, mind you, I went on.
Periodic reassessments were not conducted. Values were not adjusted in accordance with the market. Values were adjusted arbitrarily based on informal discussions in offices with no relevant facts or data. These different interactions accumulated, and resulted in values that were significantly lower than fair market value. This process was made to correct it. No process is
There's one more thing, I'm sorry.
And regular assessment processes that occurred in the city generated the same type of numbers and the same notices, same processes. Everyone had the same remedies they could take. It's no different than any other year. It's just on a mass scale. And in any given year, when a section of the city was assessed, the same considerations for the elderly and other thing, nobody seemed to care. I care. We have a list of seniors. We'll be looking at that list. We'll be looking at their properties. And if anything is, abnormally high, out of whack, we're going to be looking at those things. We're going to, I will make sure that anyone who is in a vulnerable state based on the information that we have, we will look at those. I can give you my assurance on that because it's a valid point, but this process is no different than any other reassessment that we've done.
So mind you, I just want to mention that when I went through and I looked at all these comparables that you guys compare my house, now, when I sat down to talk to you, we did comparables, remember?
We did.
And the comparables were 3-bedroom, 1-bath, which is what my house was. Well, they had a 4-bedroom, 2-bath, they had a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, they had a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, and then they had a 3-bedroom, 1.5-bath. How are you accurately comparing my house with these homes that have sold that are not the same as mine?
As I've stated before, not every house is identical. So there's going to be a range of value.
He told me that it's important if you have more bathrooms in the house because of value and extra bathrooms,
Well,
right?
bathrooms
So
are
you're telling me
secondary.
that there is no extra value to having more bathrooms?
No, that's not what I'm saying. You're putting words in my mouth. What I'm saying is that a bathroom does add value, the same way that square footage adds value. What I'm saying is that not every property is identical. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here.
I know, because if you guys used identicals, the values wouldn't have went up very much.
Yeah,
There's very few identical properties anywhere in this county.
I mean, come on. I mean, I went on your website
Yeah.
and looked at my comparables, and not one of these showed up in my comparables. So explain that to me, please.
Did you use the default settings when you
I
used
most
the
certainly
comparables?
did. Yes, I did.
That's your problem. The default settings are very broad and pull in a range of properties.
No, I went in, I put in the size of my place, right? And then I even did what the sizes they gave me here. And then I even kept it at all of these, and not one of them showed up in my comparables. I have them.
Okay, I mean, we're talking about two different.
I mean, come on.
Talking about two different systems too here, so.
Two different systems.
Yeah, you have the county's website, which is developed by a completely different company than GAR.
Yeah, but GAR is saying my house value. You're not.
But you're using the county website to try and find comparable properties, right?
Okay,
you're
but
saying?
isn't that what they want, to be able to, reflect the new price on the house? So where, I mean, are you guys gonna actually like say what's going on here?
But you can use whatever method of providing comparables that you choose. And then they will analyze those comparables.
All right, my
and
next
determine-
question to Kevin is this a permanent thing? There's no way to stop it.
No, it cannot be. And I knowing the disparity between levels of assessment and the advantages that certain parts of the city are seeing, it would be illegal for me to say that our assessment role is at a uniform level of assessment. I can't do it.
Okay, so then I gotta seek legal counsel then, is what you're telling me.
No, you do the informal and then you go to the grievance.
Oh, I'm sure a lot more people would like to get on.
No, I understand. And then you can go to small, for $30.
I mean, this
you can go to small
data
claims.
is crazy.
So-
It makes no sense. And I'm pretty sure that's why the girl chuckled over the phone and, pretty much told me that what you guys were doing was incorrect. But, that was a GAR employee doing that.
Yep. Jonathan?
Sorry I wasn't here when my name was called. So, John Shaver, I own various properties across the city. I was sufficiently satisfied with most of them. However, one that I was the outlier in my group is 109 Schuyler Street. It's up and over the hill, beyond the historic districts, beyond Montcalm Park, down where you get into closer to the power plant. I bought the property 5 years ago, less than 5 years ago, $60,000. The reassessment was for $165,000. When I look at it as a real estate investor in the city, I have to look at it from doing a pro forma analysis. And the pro forma analysis for me, in order to justify the $165,000 assessment, my cap rate is at 3%. And there's nobody that's going to invest for 3% cap rate. Here in the city, most of my stuff's probably around 9% cap rate. We could go real aggressive at 6%, but even with the 6% cap rate, we're talking, it would be $113,000, not $165,000. And that's just based on my Schedule E every year. So I guess my question is why, what was used over the hill? Because if my cap rate's 3%, that property is no longer viable for me. I know I can't offload it for $165,000. Where do we use a pro forma analysis for some of these properties and looking at it from truly an income standpoint and saying, okay, what could I rent it for? Because I could certainly try to rent it for $1,600 for a 3-bedroom apartment with no utilities included, but it's going to be there forever, or it's going to be somebody that says, oh yeah, I can get it. They'll move in 2 months later, I'm out rent. They're not paying. Eviction process. 5 months later, the apartment, the house is trashed. I had to put all this money back into it to get it back onto the market because that's what I'm being forced into from a cap standpoint to be able to get that to keep that apartment lucrative for me as an investor. So I guess my question is, looking at some of the other values over the hill, down towards the power plant, where did we come up with those numbers? Because from an investment pro forma standpoint, it just 3% is not going to last. 9% is really where it should be. In that property, I bought it for $60,000 at 9% based on my actual Schedule E tax return. It's looking at $75,000, which if it were at $75,000, I would not be here tonight. But going from 60 to 165, taking it from, we'll say like an 11% cap rate right now to a 3% cap rate, I can't justify that. So that's, I guess, my question is, when did any kind of analysis from that standpoint come into this? Because a lot of those properties over there are in the same situation. It's all, you know, it's a rental. I got to make money off it. If I'm not making money off it, then I can't maintain it. I can't keep up with codes. I have to offload it, but I can't. So that's, I guess, when did that analysis come into play in these scenarios?
Yeah, how many units?
In that one, it's a single family home.
Unit. Yeah, so what you're describing with a cap rate, net operating income, that's an income approach. The other aspect of this is a sales approach. So what is that single family selling for? So the economics of it, right? So in our world, an income producing property, a quote unquote commercial property, is 4 units and above, besides retail,
No, I understand.
industrial. So in that perspective, you know, what are the sales? What are the sales that would, in that specific neighborhood, whether it's over the hill or whatever you're describing, what are those single family, now you have a different use. You have a different use from an investment standpoint, you have a different mindset, but it's still a single family residential.
So I fully agree with you. However, when I'm that's what I do. That's my living is real estate investing. And so from that standpoint, this particular property, I mean, the market value is only 5 years old. I know that it didn't go from 60 to 165 in 5 years because we would have people from New York City flooding the market up here for sales because you're talking, I more than doubled my money in 5 years. That's amazing.
I would say, what I would suggest is look at single family because there's 2 different values. There's a value in use, and the value in use in New York State real property tax law says if it's a single family, it's a 210, you value it as such.
Right, and I completely agree with that. However, every single property that I've had appraised in the city and on refinances, on new purchases in the past 5 years, I've never once had a market value, as you're saying, based on the property itself. I've never once had the property itself be valued for less or for more than half less than the income approach. The income approach is always significantly higher, which is why there are so many rentals here in the city.
Yeah.
Because we have people that have bad credit, that can't afford homes through the bank, a mortgage, and so there's an opportunity for, they have to rent, they don't have a choice. So here in the city, there are more renters because there's more people with bad credit. And that being the case, the income approach has, in my experience, has always been at least twice the normal sale value. So I don't understand, I get what you're saying, I fully agree with what you're saying.
I think this is specific to your situation and your parcel. That's something that we could discuss at an informal review.
Yeah,
The methodology is to say you got a single family, whether you're renting it, whether what you've experienced in other parts of the city, that the income dictates a different value in your investment value analysis. At the same time, if it's a single family and you have other single families that are selling for a certain per square foot or a certain value, that is the basis for that's how we determined your value.
No, and I completely get that. And I guess I'm simply saying over the hill, 3 blocks up, when you're at the Montcalm Park or even over the hill, you're gonna find a dramatically different price per square foot than you are over the hill down where the houses are not in as good a shape, the interior's not in good shape, there's far more renters down there, there's college down there. I guess, like I said, I've never come across a property that I've refinanced or bought where the appraised value from, and they do it both ways because that's the way the bank wants them to do it. I've never had the actual real estate value based on the home itself, come even close to the income value. And so if we're if what you say you're basing it on is the actual, based on market data, I don't see it in that neighborhood. And the surrounding houses in that neighborhood have all gone up by that significant amount. I just don't see it. I feel there's some oversight in that neighborhood area getting down towards the power plant that if it were 3 blocks further up towards Montcalm Park or towards the Washington Square District, I'm on board with you. But I feel like we missed the boat going where that divide is between the Montcalm Historic District and we'll call it the power plant area. That's all I'm saying. I feel like as I said, if I bought the house 5 years ago, and so I will say I fully understand that the value of the house is irrelevant, other than to the overall tax base, the overall city's the gross value of the city, because I understand that the value is just there to tax it. I get that. I understand that. And so when I look at it from that standpoint, I'm trying to get it in line with the rest of the city and saying, okay, 5 years ago, it was at a certain rate within the rest of the city. I was willing to pay that relative to the value of the whole city's property value. And I feel like now that's gotten grossly, it's come grossly on the other side, is grossly inflated. So that, again, I feel like there should have been a little bit more of an analysis on the income approach to this, and less comparing that to places that are in the city that are more desirable neighborhoods, if you will. So that's all I got. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm George Valentine. My wife Karen and I own 228 East 5th Street. Have for about 30 years now. One thing I wanted to make sure of before I get started is we're Oswegonians. We care about the community, and a lot of issues have been raised that will affect the long term of our community. What I've heard a lot tonight is fear, not so much about our individual situation, but as you were talking about, what's going to happen to the elderly when they get priced out? What happens, as Connie was talking about, with the effect of rentals coming in, people having to leave, especially when these assessments get locked in? Holy cow. We're going to miss that community that we've had. How many people have come up here tonight and talked about the long-term effects for Oswego, for our neighborhoods? Isn't that what really is underneath everything else we've talked about? Lathrop Street, all these other places. I wanted to, gentrification, rental properties, seniors living, worsening neighborhoods, and it will be compounded when these assessments, you used the phrase earlier about how the other assessments in the past were arbitrary.
Some of the changes were arbitrary and some of the numbers were definitely arbitrary.
I pose to you that a lot of what Gar has brought up, nothing against you, Rich, is also arbitrary. How many of you feel that going, in my case, I went from 61,000 to 142,000, like that? How many folks here, please, a show of hands, think that what Gar has brought to us is arbitrary? Thank you. You're going to have an awful lot of people getting in touch with you. Nothing at all about you. But on this page, I have until March 29th to submit what I think is arbitrary. I know you've talked about May 1st and July 1st and all those other, isn't this the first deadline? If I miss March 29th getting this to you, Am I up the creek?
No.
No.
No, all the other remedies are still available to you.
Okay, then why do I have a paper saying, gosh darn it, George, you better get this in by March 29th?
For the informal review process.
It's a separate process.
Yeah, you have the grievance day in the Board of Assessment Review, which is afforded to you every year. It's no different this year.
So if I write this, so if I send this in to you,
Yeah.
and I say, holy cow, I went up to 142,000, how soon do you get back in touch with me?
You'd be, in and around May 1st, you would receive notification so that you have enough time to prepare for the Board of Assessment Review, which is the fourth Tuesday in May.
Okay, thank you. I really, I'm concerned for you, Kevin, because I appreciate that you're doing the best that you can, but when you come to me and say, well, hold on, I'll ask you a couple of quick questions. My comparables, the comparables that you had brought up to me, included a house that's a corner lot directly across the street from East Park. Are corner lots considered more valuable than others, or houses that directly face, say, East Park are different, more valuable?
It's on a case-by-case basis. Typically, a corner lot might have some more land, but everything needs to be extracted from the market. So there are scenarios where it might be more desirable, a corner lot, and there's sometimes when it's not.
Because the comparable properties that were brought to me by GAR include neighborhoods all across the east side, some that are up by the lake, some that are across the street from East Park, some that, let me see, are on main streets. I believe that they are valued differently than my house. Is there a difference? Can I make the argument that, hold it a second, I'm not across the street from East Park?
Yeah, I mean, that's the
argument?
whole premise of the informal review process. You can make any argument you want, and what we're saying is, here are some comparables. Now, you're free to disagree with the comparables.
Okay.
Chances are, if you don't like your value, you're not going to like the comparables to come up with. You're talking about going from 63 to 142. That wasn't a magic number that we just came up with. That was based on sales and activity and arm's length transactions that occurred within your neighborhood or surrounding neighborhood that we feel are comparable. Now, in the event that you don't agree with those sales that were utilized or presented to you, either on the pros site or if you called, that's the whole premise of doing an informal review, because if nothing else, in an informal review, it forces us to reanalyze collaboratively, too, by the way, where we make a recommendation. Ultimately, anything that you submit, we review, we look at it. That paperwork of whatever, and this is important, whether it's appraisals, interior photos, that all gets reviewed and eventually forwarded to the assessment office.
So I would make my arguments just on the comparables that you'd raised, or I can bring in my own comparables?
You can bring your own sales comparables. You can also bring assessments in. So in other words, if you have similar properties assessment-wise, again, the goal is to make sure everybody's fair and equitable. So if there's a property that's similar to you that has not sold, but carries a very different assessment to indicate that I'm excessive in comparison to what I feel is a similar property, that's another part of our analysis.
What's been the experience from GAR when people say, hold it a second, I believe that I'm overassessed?
Yeah.
It goes all over the map, I'd imagine, but
Yeah. With all due respect, I've gotten book reports, I've gotten dissertations, I've got why someone doesn't love their wife. All right? So I can't sit here and say, and I work in all kinds of different communities. So it's really hard. What I will say, though, is that if someone substantiates the fact, whether through photos, whether through a recent appraisal, whether there's sales and/or assessments that suggest that it is excessive or out of line, at that point, there is this window of opportunity where before you go to a formal grievance process, before you go to a small claims, a lot of times, we try to correct any mistakes that there are, or any inconsistencies, should I say.
Once that happens, once I get the report back from you, then I could go, then I look forward to the.
Well, you may get a notice that there's an adjustment in your value that you feel is more reflective. It's over. There's no other step to go to.
Okay.
The tentative roll will be filed May 1st. That assessment will be in place if it is reduced. In the event that it's not, you, as you do every year, you have the opportunity to, for lack of better terms, go to the next step to challenge your assessment. Again, these values are preliminary. So there is this opportunity now where adjustments, where warranted, can be made, and you always have grievance and you always have small claims.
Now, you have to, Kevin, you would have to sign off on the final assessment. There's a phrase in the material you gave us that the assessment and the assessor's value are identical, are eventually identical.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I certified the tentative roll. The Board of Assessment Review makes the changes that result in the final roll.
There's a book that's mentioned in this material that's referred to as How to Estimate the Market Value of Your Home. I look forward to tomorrow coming by your office and picking up a copy of that.
Mm-hmm.
I invite most anybody else to find out how the state of New York offers you the information on how to estimate the market value of your home so we can be better prepared in doing the informal assessment. One point that I wanted to make, especially to the mayor and to the city council, to others involved, other public servants. In the written material, it refers to a transition assessment as a possible option. Now, you talked about how a pause is unavailable. Is a transition assessment available? Where essentially over the course of a period of time, just so it won't hit people so quickly where they have these assessments that are locked in by this summer.
That would be an option if the distribution of assessments was at the same level and we were implementing a change to a single property. The problem is, because everyone is at a different level, you can't fairly and equitably implement staged increases because you have people that are currently being disproportionately disadvantaged because they're paying too much. So how do you stage in for some and also make other people whole for paying too much? So there's no way to effectively do that other than to correct it.
My assessment went up 142%. I can appreciate going up 30%, 40% in the course of a year. But is there a way, I believe I understand what you're saying. Is there a way that these new assessments can come in gradually so it doesn't affect quite so dramatically the elderly, the rental properties, the neighborhoods,
Kevin,
that sort of thing?
do you mind if I answer
Yeah,
this
go
one? So, transition assessments like this, as I understand it, we haven't had a community that's actually done one of these, but from what I've learned of them, they actually set your assessed value at what the reassessment value is, and then put an exemption on the property so that it gets phased in over a number of years. Setting those assessed values at the reassessment sets the size of your piece of the pie, and then it just gets exempted. But the amount that you're going to pay in taxes is still going to be the same proportionally. And then the assessment just goes up, but you're still getting that same share. Does that make sense? It doesn't really save you any money by doing it that way.
I appreciate that, but it takes, instead of a hard and fast, let me see, I guess it does two things. One, it gives the individual a bit more time to say, hey, I really don't own a house that's worth $142,000.
But if you don't own a house that's worth $142,000, that's what you go through the process to challenge it as.
But I have very little time, and there are dozens and dozens of people who coulda, shoulda, woulda been here tonight who don't have the benefit of having sat through the time that you've described it to us. We talked about the elderly folks who aren't here tonight, the folks who couldn't stay the 2 hours that we've spent here. If it could be phased in over time, maybe through an exemption, not a pause, I'll still have that assessment that is determined, but it'll take a little while, it'll move toward that. It'll still be budget zero, but it will give people enough more opportunity than just a few weeks to make their case.
But what she's saying is that proportionally, if you exempt an equal amount of each person's assessment, your component of what you pay is going to stay the same. So your taxes will be no different at this percentage of your assessment up to the full assessment, because you have to remain at a fair level within that level of exemption. So it's the same as assessing at 50%, for example. If we only said everyone's assessments were 50% of the fair market value, it would look better on paper to everybody. They'd feel better about it, but they're still going to pay the same taxes.
Yeah,
the
tax
tax rates
would
go
be
up,
higher.
and it's not going to have an impact on the amount you pay because your place is already established.
But the value
It just
isn't-
looks better.
But the value isn't locked in a matter of weeks.
But it
It's
doesn't
over a
change
period of
your
time.
tax liability, so what difference?
I believe it would mean a lot to people who didn't have the chance to be here tonight to learn about this. It
But
would
if
give
there's
them
no
more time to
financial
learn.
impact, the number is,
If-
I mean, I understand the psychological, but if the concern is the financial well-being or impact, and there's no impact to doing that, why do it?
Kevin, are you saying that you're gonna put the RP 485 on everybody's taxes, or?
That would be the implementation. It would be a broad.
Right, so the
Yeah.
mayor needs to approve that, right?
But it wouldn't change any sort of liability.
But my question
Okay.
is, are you offering?
No.
Is the mayor approving it and offering it as an opportunity?
Absolutely not. It was hypothetically proposed because he read it in the material.
So you're blankly approving the 485?
It's not that. It's not the,
Because my understanding of the 485 is that it needs to be approved by the mayor and council, and then those who want to use the RP 485 can fill out the form, submit it to you, it can get approved, and then, as he's saying, it doesn't necessarily, it's not blanketly approved, so what you're saying is, well, you still have the same tax liability, you have less tax liability because you're assuming that other people in the city are
Correct.
not applying for that.
well, I would assume that everyone would take advantage of a staged-in assessment.
You and I know that not everybody's gonna do that.
But then you're also disadvantaging the folks that you're trying to help. The ones that don't know what's going on would be the ones that don't turn it in. They'd be at full assessment. They'd be even more disproportionately taxed. It would end up hurting those folks. So I don't think it's something that, would make a lot of sense. Yeah.
Okay,
Putting the 45, is the 45 being blankly applied to everyone?
It's not even a consideration at this point. It was just hypothetically proposed.
oh,
The mayor, is the city going to offer the opportunity for individuals to apply for a 45 exemption? I wouldn't expect it to be
Yeah.
tonight, but I would expect it to be sometime in the future with the council. That's my challenge.
I mean, it could be looked at, of course. Yeah, it could be looked at. But again, if the intent is to help the people that are most impacted by this process, the ones that are not able to be here, the ones who are the most disadvantaged, you're going to disproportionately affect them if they are not those who respond to things like that. So in the end, they're going to be paying an even higher proportion of the taxes. But still, I mean, then you're really going to push them out. As all of the people that, are in the know do it, and the people that are left don't know, so, yeah. I think it would have the opposite effect of what the intent that's being presented.
And even if that
too
was to
vague.
take place, to apply for such exemptions would have to have been done by March 1st, because that was taxable status date anyway. And that's the taxable status date for this assessment roll. So even if it was tried to be adopted by the Common Council, it's too late at this point anyway.
2 final points. If there's no such thing as a pause, and there's no such thing as a transitional, then the only thing we have is to make those arguments, those difficult arguments, first to you, and then to May, and then in May, and then in July. That's, as I said, we're a community.
But there's a
And yet,
very
we're going to be
difficult-
breaking into smaller pieces. one of the other points that I want to make about the transitional idea, to see if that's something that may be even considered by the other public servants. If I don't do anything, if I'm an elderly person or someone, or a single mom who's just too darn busy to sit here for the 3 hours, then I'm going to be stuck with the assessment that your organization has put in. If I do fight it, I've got a fighting chance. So I guess I'm speaking partially for the dozens and dozens and dozens of people who are going to just accept the assessment and face the consequences as they arise. Thank you very much for all the time that you've put in, and thank you all for taking the time tonight.
I'll make it short. I'm Pat Schrader. I live on 145 Ellen Street. My assessment went up 100%, but based on 83 versus 100, my taxes, or my assessment went up $75,000. Now, I would love to sell my house for what it is. I don't think I can. I could come close. I live on a busy street. I live right across the street from a 100-foot water tower, which doesn't bother me so much, but it does affect people on buying. I live across from an assisted living house. I really, personally, I don't, but if somebody wanted to buy my house, which very few wouldn't pay the $229 assessment. You know, in the summertime, there are 20 people out across the street at that assisted living house, smoking cigarettes, smoking pot, fighting, which I literally had to go over and to try to break it up. The guy that runs the place, I'm not going to mention any names, we can't touch him. What do you mean? The guy's down on the ground, he's 80 years old, and the other guy's fighting with him. You can't touch him? I says, come on, you got to do something. So a lot of people would see that. I don't think they're going to want to buy my house. I live on Ellen Street. I don't know, some people know. If you come down Fish Street, a lot of people come down Ellen Street, over to Holly Street, and then down to Erie Street, and cut across to the west side of town. It's busy. A lot of people wouldn't like it. Mini bikes, everything go up and down that street. Homeless people go up and down the street. I don't know where they go, but they do. I'm not arguing. It is a nice home. I'd be happy, and I think my assessment should go up, because I've done a lot of work on my house since I bought it in, let me see, 16, I believe it was. So I would like to get it down some to at least make up for it, because I've talked to some friends of mine that have nicer houses than me on the nicer streets and everything else, where their taxes went down. It sort of drives me crazy, where their taxes go down, and so they're pretty close to my taxes. But they would have no problem selling the house. Okay, I'm done with that bit. We're at 100% assessment, school taxes. So our taxes for school tax are going to be based on that assessment. So we got the town of Oswego, Scriba, Minetto, and everybody else are not assessed at 100%. How does that work? Now, we put that up there, I saw that.
Yeah.
But you're basing it on the assessment.
No, I didn't. I explicitly did not.
That's the only thing I can't figure out.
Okay.
You can make it quick, I don't, because I don't want to spend,
Honestly, what's funny about it, you want information, right?
This tax levy from the entire school district is apportioned out based on that full value column, not this assessed tax.
right, but
So if the city is at 100%, it would be this number on both.
I heard that. But you aren't reassessing the other people's houses. You're still basing it on their assessment from, let's say, 2 or 3 years ago.
What other people's houses?
For the outside the city of Oswego for school tax.
That's what the equalization rate does, is bring them up.
I can guarantee you all of them are decreasing, because reassessment activity is not happening in all of these towns. That full value number on that side is going to be larger in all of those places. That proportional percentage of the total, we won't know until the budget is
So-
out, but that is still going to stay probably about the same, because that's what happens year over year over year over year. Even in communities that reassess. The city of Fulton did this in 2022, and the city of Fulton School District, their proportion of it did not change dramatically. I believe it was like 0.1% that it went up after their reassessment.
So your letter that you gave me, you're telling me my tax is gonna change. Now, this is a guesstimate. Now, I know it's based on, how much the city needs, how much the county needs, and how much the school needs for their budget. So you're saying it might not change much. So you're saying my increase will go up about $660.
Your increase.
Yeah.
That's you.
That's
Well,
me.
you're one individual person, one individual property owner, and you may see a tax shift increase because of your new assessment. That doesn't mean that the city of Oswego is on the hook for a tax shift increase at the school district.
I don't know. I just, you know, I've talked to some friends, like I say, and I look at their houses and I look at mine and I go, it's not comparable, which I will talk to, but I do not see you ever getting everything done. Like you say, you're gonna go help senior citizens
We're
and
gonna
everything
do
else.
everything we can do.
And you can't do it in the time frame for the.
We have several months still. We have a lot of time still, so. We have all the way through March, we have April, we have all of May. So we have time.
You're gonna
And,
be
you know,
a
we're
busy
gonna
person.
fight. That's right, we're gonna get
You're
to
gonna
every
be a busy
person. and-
But thank you for your time.
Hi, John Gozick, from 275 West 7th Street. I'm old and I'm falling asleep, so hang in there with me. I've heard a lot of people talk about their individual properties and their concerns, and I've spoken over the course of the last 25, 30 years with different assessors about why not to do a full value assessment. And one of the reasons is what you're seeing here tonight. And something that strikes home with me is it's lost the personal touch that a lot of these people, I heard Judge Shaver talk about the neighborhoods, which these folks don't know the neighborhoods. Kevin, you do. On a more personal level, if it was done at a slower rate, instead of a full value assessment, which I think is wrong, a lot of these problems would have been solved because our own assessors know the properties, they know the people, they know the areas a lot better, respectfully, than these people do. Another item that they said is very costly to do this, and you're going to generate a lot of discontent, inequality. My assessment, I didn't come here to talk about that, but going up $150,000, ridiculous. And I've heard from people all over town with similar concerns. So I spoke initially about rescinding or a pause. I wasn't aware of the fact that this Common Council didn't have the authority to draft a local law to do that. I still need to know for sure that they don't. If they do have the authority.
They do not.
They do not.
They do not.
Because of the state?
It's governed by state law.
The reval.
No, assessment in general is governed by state law.
No, I understand.
It's to create a divide between the assessment process and the political process.
I understand that. But had we not chosen, Kevin, to do this, we would still be working against the law? That's what I'm confused
Well,
about.
whoever the assessor was that signed off on the roll and said that we were at a certain level of assessment, if they were fully aware, had the knowledge and information that we have now, and said that we were, knowing that we have properties from 30% of full market value up to 100 or more, I would argue that that is not consistent with the law.
So all of the other assessors for the past 27 years, Democrat and Republican administrations were wrong.
I told you I'm not here to point fingers.
Oh, no, I'm not. I didn't mean it that way.
I just know that over time, when you only assess small portions of the city, or you assess homes that sold, which we are, right off the bat, the first thing you learn in assessment is you do not spot assess, because that person is now near or at market value. Everyone else is still down at whatever level they were at before. They're paying a disproportionately high amount of tax. Historically, the city of Oswego has spot assessed. You bought a home, you were assessed at that value. You were paying more by proportion than everyone else in the city. That process, in combination with random small segment reassessments, has led to a tremendous inequality, inequity, unfair tax structure, and here's the argument that's being lost here. And it's insensitive, and I apologize, but I have to say it because it's true, it's accurate. So like I mentioned before, there's a portion of the city that's been subsidizing a greater portion of the city. The greater portion of the city who has been paying less taxes has been doing so at artificially low assessments for an extended period of time. During that period, there was an accumulated benefit of the taxes that should have been paid by that property based on its true market value that were not. Say that's 10, 15, 20 years, and for round numbers, say $1,000.
I heard your dissertation. I understand it.
So this year, those people will see an increase, and I feel awful. It's difficult. It's all at once. It's horrible. But if your taxes go up 1,000, you probably should have been paying 1,000 or some number near there for 5, 10, who knows? Because you're supposed to be at a certain proportion of the entire populace. So 20,000 you've benefited, and now we're trying to correct that. So it's hard for people to accept it. It's difficult. I'm already the bad guy. I mean, I know I accept it, but I'm doing what's right. I know it's right. There's a systematic problem with the assessments that exist in our system. We have to fix it. If the number's wrong, we'll work with you to fix it. That's what this is about. And I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to talk to anyone that wants to look at comparables, to do what we need to do. You can call GAR. They're very helpful, despite some of the things we heard tonight. Everyone I've talked to has had a wonderful experience with them. They've been helpful. They've talked them through the process. The point is, get it right. Get a value that we can stand behind. We know. Make sure that everyone is paying their fair share. And you know what? I don't feel good that 25% of the city or 82% of businesses are paying too much. I don't like that. I mean, I don't think it's right, and I understand. There's a natural tendency to shift costs to populations that we feel have the money or are able, but the law says it's supposed to be fair, equitable, uniform level of assessment. That's what we're trying to do. So
I agree, but the law doesn't say you have to do this. So.
We pulled the mask off. That's the issue. Is we pulled the mask off. We see where how extensive the issues are. You can't put it back on. You just can't, because then we're basically telling half of the city or a portion of the city, we're going to make you keep paying too much. We know you are, but we're going to keep doing it.
I get it. I've heard all the dissertation.
That's the
okay.
problem.
I get it.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to despair anybody here or criticize this firm or anything at all. All I was saying was that over 27 years that it hasn't been done. It wasn't broken.
It was done in 1997 was the last one.
Oh, I thought you said 27.
And we had the exact same process then, and people went bananas then too. So
well,
it's the same, and we expect it, and it's justified. It's absolutely justified.
Right.
But the reality of the situation is there was such a long period of accumulated benefit that people they don't consider it as part of this process, and most people don't want to talk about that, but that should also be considered to be fair. I mean,
I understand exactly what you're saying. I've heard the whole dissertation.
Yeah.
The only point I was trying to make is that the assessors that I talked to in the past said you open a can of worms with this thing doing a full
Politically
reval.
very
It's
unpopular.
not necessary.
Yes.
Not necessary is the word, and several of the legislators and people in government that I spoke to were led to believe that it was necessary. And I think, and you were on council at the time, respectfully, I have the utmost respect for you, this isn't personal. But I believe if those councilors knew then what was going to happen today, they wouldn't have voted to do this reval at all. I know if I was on that council, I wouldn't have voted to do it.
Let me pose a question to you then.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, let me pose a question to you and generally. Is it okay that the assessments were structured such that a significant portion of the city was paying a disproportionate amount of taxes? Is that fair?
I can't answer that question directly. I can't say whether it's fair or not fair. What I can say is there wasn't an outcry either way of too high or too low.
Because no one knew. The data wasn't there.
And everyone was
nobody
happy.
knew.
And if
But
it isn't
that's-
broken, don't fix it.
But John, that's not a relevant argument.
I know, I
Right
just
is right,
wanted-
John,
I just-
and fair share of taxes is what's right.
I just wanted to exercise my opinion, that's all.
All right. Well, I
And
appreciate it.
and I truly believe that these counselors, and at the time knew, they wouldn't have proceeded with this. That's my
But
opinion.
the reasoning
Now,
is, there's a lot of political underpinnings to that. And that's why people don't do revals, because they're very politically unpopular. And you know what, I sit here and I take it every day, all day, but I know, it's the right thing to do. We should
you may
fix the
believe that,
inequity.
but when these aldermen, councilmen have to listen to the constituency, and 90% of them say it isn't right, there's a big difference.
Well,
So
90%
I have not one single person in this, I'm all over town all the time, as you know, I've not had one person in favor of it, not even one. Even the ones that were equal or were going to be reduced weren't in favor of it. So my point is, these guys represent the people in their wards. I understand you've got a job to do, but I just wanted to tell you how I disagree with all of this. I'll go through the grievance process, I'll do what I need, but in defense of a lot of the older people, and I had one gentleman up in the 7th Ward stop me, he says, we don't even go on a computer, we don't know how to do this, we're just going to pay the tax. And I think a lot of people are going to just do that, and that's just as wrong as what you're saying, because they're going to be overtaxed, not question it, and have to pay it. So anyway, and I'm going to ask you for the last time, this is not something that the Common Council can either pause through a local law or not.
No, and if you
No,
look
you
at...
said no, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's, if you look at the opinions of council by the State Board of Equalization and Assessment, this particular issue was brought up, and it was another municipality.
Rochester, they're bringing it up right now.
This wasn't Rochester, but it was where the legislative body tried to stop a revaluation, then return to the prior year's assessment roll, and the state had ruled that they could not do that. They did not have the authority. The legislative body doesn't have the powers to do that.
Okay, when you get a chance, I appreciate it.
You can have this copy, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Again.
I appreciate your comments, John. I understand.
Just
But
a lot of-
we started the process. If we hadn't made it to the point of having the data, knowing the outcome, it would be a different story. If we didn't know how big the discrepancy was and how disproportionate all of the numbers were, it would be a different situation. But we made it too far.
But you do give me the point that, or give me my point that when done locally, on a slower basis, with a Oswego people that know the neighborhoods, that can give special attention to the areas that need it. When Connie Cosmeno spoke, John Shaver spoke, nobody can look at those issues. A local assessor could look at those issues and determine, well, yeah, maybe there is a heck of a student population here and my house isn't working as much, rather than fly a drone over and look at it.
But decades of local assessors and no outside input is what causes such disparity. So there's
We agree.
I understand.
We agree to disagree.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Just to follow up, if there's no way to pause, if there's no way to transition, is there a way that instead of going from, 83% to 100%, that could be phased in over a period of time.
It still doesn't address the issue.
It would address the issue that you're raising, but it would give other people, the elderly folks who don't use computers, the folks who are just too darn busy, it would give them time to make their case. The taxes would still go up, but instead of 83% to 100% in one fell swoop, it would be, that could be gradually brought up.
But again, the proportion would have to be the correct proportion, meaning the taxes would be the same regardless of what level you're at.
It's still a portion of market value.
It doesn't change the numbers.
Would people have the opportunity, a longer period of time, to question what many people feel is an arbitrary figure?
It would have no impact.
With you right now. I'm just saying, is that a possibility? Is that something that the Common Council can consider? And if there's no direct answer on that, then maybe there'll be one soon. Thank you.
I will say, with all due respect, that having more time, if they're not availing themselves to their resources now, I don't know exactly what more time will give them, but if they disagree with their assessment next year, or the year after, or the year after, you can challenge your assessment every year. This is not your only opportunity to do so. If people throw their hands up and decide that they don't want to go through this process, and then decide next year, well, maybe it was worth my while and I want to go through it now, they have that opportunity to do so.
Bethany Rando, 80 West 7th Street. Okay, so we keep hearing all about how we have all these options for the grievance, and that's great. We know that, we're gonna go through it. You don't need to know what my assessment is, what it was. But maybe all we're looking for is like a little bit of accountability, just like a little bit. The literal job as assessor is to assess the property. So why do we not wanna point fingers and talk about how a job that we, the city, paid for that many years wasn't being done properly, and on top of that, then we paid another $300,000 for a company who, according to a whole lot of anecdotal evidence tonight, didn't really knock it out of the park. They just didn't. Are you concerned at all that there's a lot of people saying, hey, this isn't right? Does that concern you at all?
It concerns me to the extent that the most vocal voices we hear are the people who were the most severely underassessed for the most significant amount of time. So if the value is incorrect, and I'm willing to bet anything on this, the changes are not going to be as significant and dramatic as the. So if you went from 50,000 to 140, the change if there is a change to get to a fair market value is probably far less significant than that initial jump. So the reason the taxes are going up for certain people are because of how far away they were from those numbers. So we're hearing from, this room holds, let's say 100 people. The city has over 6,500 parcels that are, not special parcels exempt like that. So 100 out of 6,500, and John mentioned that everyone he's talked to has expressed, that they don't like the reassessment, even the ones whose taxes are going down or staying the same. I've heard the exact opposite. I've had people come in consistently saying they think it's a good thing. They've talked to realtors. The numbers are correct. They believe them. I mean, we have people are saying, some of mine were spot on. There's one outlier. Okay, we look at the outlier. We help you get that adjusted. So I've heard everything. I've heard good, bad, up, down, but the most vocal are the ones who were so far from any semblance of a fair market value. And I understand, I get it. They were dramatic increases, but those were the properties that, as you said, were not periodically assessed appropriately. So I.
Sure. I'm new with the state, and I'm a homeowner myself.
to get into somebody's house, how many people here are willing to let an appraiser into their house in the state?
Tomorrow, 10 a.m. in my house.
Same.
Fine. But that's
Two.
not, that's fine, but that's not most people, and that is, I've been out there, I've been doing them since I started, and people don't want you there. It is a very tough job, and you have to work off the information you get when you have a sale. That's the best information you get. You can see inside the homes, and you can get actual, what the numbers are from what one person who doesn't know the other is making arm's length transaction. There was no family or anything else involved in that, and that's the best way to get it. But I've seen a lot of what the state does, and it's mind-boggling how deep they go into this to get these numbers accurate and do the adjustments and the trends. And it's stuff in high school that I hope I never have to see again, and now I do it every day. But it's I understand how it looks to say, oh well, this house was here, and this house had 4 bedrooms, but my house only has 3. They adjust for that all the time, and I've seen it at work. And I'm as skeptical as anybody else about government, but I understand it a little bit more, and it is hard to explain. And there's a lot that goes into it, but I understand how those errors happen in certain cases, but it's not broad. And I've seen the work they do across the state, and it's solid. I guess for him to
I want to believe that it's solid.
No, but what I'm saying is there is a lot in appraisal. It's an opinion of value, and you have to. But there's a lot of different ways that you approach that to lessen the chances of just wrong data.
Well, and that's what I wonder, like, how many of these are going to actually be grieved? And how many of them are actually going to be found? Because I just want to talk about what we're doing wrong, really. Like, how many of these are, if at the end of the day, 50% of their numbers were wrong, can we not say, we paid you $300,000 to do a job that you didn't do properly, is the first thing. But whatever. Let me just ask anybody this question. This thing here. Page 7. 3. Does anybody have a copy of that? Can you just look at that?
I don't have a copy of it. Sure. So under unlawful assessment, was assessed by someone other than the assessor, or your assessment was entered, changed after the tentative assessment rule. There are special provisions that apply to reassessments, so that would not apply to that. So that condition would not be an unlawful.
That's not just like a general thing. What do you mean? Like,
What's that?
I think this is.
It means if
I did the assessment.
correct.
If I put an assessed value on a property that's an unlawful assessment, I'm not the assessor for the city of
Correct.
Oswego, and I'm not allowed to do
So
so.
because he has the final say, it's okay that you got the numbers from these guys?
He
Well, the
contracted
state
the
has
company.
different guidelines that govern the reassessment process. And I do have to ultimately, look at these numbers and say,
Sign off on the
I have to sign off on the tentative roll. So that's in May. There's, people have the opportunity to come in and meet with me directly over the actual value. Right now, I've been helping people go through the process, but I have been, other than making corrections to inventories, changing number of bedrooms, things like that, I'll transmit that to GAR as part of people's informal review. During this process, to preserve the integrity of the data and the revaluation process, I have not told them to change any values, just a flat like, well, I think this property should be 20, this one. I won't do that, because I know it's just not, again, arbitrary decisions, things like that. But after this process completes, the tentative roll is established, people do have the ability to come speak with me, and as an extension of the Board of Assessment Review, we can, if you bring evidence to support a change, we can enter into what are called stipulated agreements. They get ratified by the Board of Assessment Review, and that can also change your value. So there's lots of moving parts here.
I have no doubt that like, the numbers will end up where they should be. I have no doubt about that. But I'm still stuck on the fact that what are we doing and what have we been doing, and what's the plan going forward to make sure we don't end up in the same position again? Like, we
Good
gotta
question.
talk about it. We
Yeah,
gotta
we-
talk about the assessor.
We actually had the same discussion, and it's, you know, you need a council that's vigilant, you need an executive that's vigilant who, you know, makes sure if we start to see that equalization rate start to drop, you remedy it. You have to have someone in that office who is, you know, watching trends, watching sales, adjusting values, you know, both broadly and within certain areas of the city. You know, it's my job. I have to do that. I have to do that. But you know what? I'm also a human, and if things start to move, if we start to deviate from, you know, those values, they've got to, you know, they got to watch it. They got to keep on it.
Do you acknowledge some fault in this then? Because
I mean, I've been there for 5 months.
For what years were you on the council?
I was on the council. Oh, yes. I would absolutely, because I had no idea the extent to which values were disproportionate. 100%. I was on from 2018 till 23, and I had no idea. No idea. Yep.
So if you were on the council during that time,
Yep.
in 2019, when our property was reassessed, it was reassessed wrong then. If now, however many years later, 4, we're going up $136,000. So in 2019, the groups of homes, and must be every assessment prior to that must have been done incorrectly.
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, you know, periodic, regular assessments were not conducted in a way that would have kept up with market values. So, I don't want to make any broad statements.
Was it up to whatever the market value was?
Yeah,
The market's not changed $136 on my house.
There are indications that a lot of areas have changed dramatically. Sure.
They're so high.
All right, I gotta go. My apologies for interrupting. I would like to formally and cordially invite you to assess my house, 30 Smith Beach Road, tomorrow at 10 a.m. Any of you would like to show up, by all means, you can do your job properly then. You too, Mr. Mayor, please come by.
I'd counter to meet you upstairs at 10 a.m. tomorrow, and I'll.
You can assess my house in person the way it should be done,
Okay.
not via Skype or a camera or a drone.
Well, during this process is not the time to do that. Yeah. Hello.
Just a couple questions.
Sure.
Mark Powell, 288 Elm Street. I've been a city resident for less than 5 years. Just trying to understand these values. So I looked up the number for the total assessed value of the city, and it was shown us, so I guess I looked it up right, about $854 million.
Yep.
So, and that came from a sworn statement in April 20th of 23 from the city assessor.
Yep.
And then we're supposed to be, what, at 83%, you said, of 100% evaluation? And that's
broadly
by the state, they agree with that number? So now, and I was curious, because I was like, what's the new tentative? Granted, that number's gonna change, but I heard this gentleman say 58%. So does that mean the new tentative value of or the value of the properties is gonna be $1,350,000,000?
That's where it is right now, based on the preliminary numbers.
In 1 year's time, the state was wrong, the city was wrong by $500 million on the city property in 1 year? Does that seem unreasonable to anybody? 500 million on an $800 million worth?
Therein lies the problem, is the equalization rate. And this occurs across New York State. I don't want to speak for Orbs, but if I may.
Yep.
It's when one of the things, and they do a lot, the Office of Real Property Tax Services, but they establish equalization rates. And what they do is they take a random sample of sales within a given community. Could be in this part of the city, could be a vacant, could be commercial. And they compare what it sold for to the assessment, and they develop what's called an equalization rate that's utilized. Nothing on the books to carrier values at 100%. What is on the books is a uniform percent of value, and that equalization rate. Now, if everybody was at 83%, it'd be a mathematical equation. We wouldn't be here, and it would just be a math equation, and everybody's value would be spot on. The problem with the equalization rate is that it's not parcel specific. So a couple things happened here, and your question's a good one. How did we, if you just did the math at 83, you divide that, how did we go up by so much? Two things happened. Number one, we did data verification. I just want to be clear. We didn't use drones, okay? We used satellite imagery, we used aerial imagery, okay, where we could measure. Okay, it's very accurate. It's now, after COVID, somewhat of an industry standard across assessment jurisdictions across New York State. But we captured uncaptured inventory, and we cleansed the data to the standpoint that we had some improvements, some square footage. There was inventory items that were now captured that equated material impact on the value. So you had inventory. The other thing is we made it parcel specific. So in other words, we looked at everybody's house and we said, okay, this house, and I'm just using an arbitrary example, 1,500 square foot, old style, in this area of the city, here are the sales that are not exactly the same, but they're within the range. And through that process, we developed the value, and that value exceeded the 83% of the equalization rate. So in other words, the 83 was not an accurate number.
Yeah, it was
No, it
based
should have been 42?
It could have been.
Well, you're saying you went up 58%? I mean, that's pretty simple math to me.
It could have been 65. It could have been
based on
75.
data that we didn't have until they
But so
did
the system is severely flawed. If you're saying that last year certified, which maybe is criminal because it really wasn't anywhere near that, is worth, the city's worth, you know, $854 million, and this year it's worth $1,350 million. That's a big number in 1 year.
The issue with the system, quite frankly, is that there's nothing mandating municipalities to carry their values at 100%. So what's happening is you have these equalization rates that the Office of Real Property Tax Services does their best to establish across New York State. And a great example would be the Oswego City School District. You have varying municipalities.
I'm talking about just the value in the property of the city. We're not
I
even
understand
talking,
what
we
you're
didn't even hit it by
saying.
50%. That's, if I
and
did my
that's
job
one
at
of the problems.
50%, I wouldn't have a job.
Yeah, that's one of the problems. And there's nothing mandating any municipality to carry their values at 100%. The intention is to make it parcel specific. So your house, what you have, is and establishing a market value at 100% so that the vehicle to what you pay in taxes is your assessment and your value. So we established a full market value so that this way you're paying your fair share of taxes. The person that lives next to you that may have a better property or an inferior property is now assessed appropriately.
I understand that, but that doesn't seem unreasonable to anybody that they were off by 58% in 1 year. That's a pretty big number, 58%.
I've seen worse.
I don't care what you've seen worse. I'm saying this is the community I live in.
Yeah.
That's a big number, 58% increase in the value. That's not normal. I'm sorry, in the world that I live in.
It actually is normal in this,
I
during
don't
these
think so.
processes.
So another question is, what metrics, you said, okay, sales, but I've seen, just tooling around some of the comparisons, houses that sold in '23, you've actually increased the value in '24. Based on what metrics, like what percent increase? Because just a little bit of research, the market's actually coming down, and it has been since before March 1st. So how did you get from, if my house sold in '23, that it's worth 10% more? Is it worth 12% more?
I would respectfully disagree with that. I think the numbers show that while it's not the same increase post-COVID, it still is appreciating.
So,
and that's dictated by trends that have established.
Okay, and where do you find those trends? What does your company use to determine those trends? Do you use your own model? Is it, I mean, do you look at it on a local real estate model, like Howard handed down the street, their records, or?
Well, we just look at transactional data. So we'll look at sales from 22 to 23 and from 23 to 24, and the state of New York does their own trends.
Yep, we do the same thing. Corey had them during her presentation. We have market analysts within our office who they'll just look at all the sales of a particular, like all the residential sales from this year to this year, and they say on average it went up 12% more.
I said, I'm not a real estate appraiser. I've never been. Don't know how valid Realtor.com is, but they have 3 specific independent companies that gather data. And I've just been curious. Every day I check it, they must do it all the time because that value changes every day. In the last 2 weeks since I've got this valuation, it's gone down $10,000. That's 3 separate entities. So I'm just saying, is what metrics did you use? Just this locality, across the state, and when? When was the last time you actually checked that? Was it October, November, December, January, February?
Yeah, we stay within this locality. The other thing too, which has been outlined, is there's certain statutory dates. So in other words, one of the dates, the statutory date is July 1st. July 1st is the date that, and this is no different from the project. Every year, July 1st, the final roll is filed. It's also the valuation date. So when you're saying you're looking at it, at some point, last week or 2 weeks ago, it's not real time for us. We have certain statutory legal dates that we have to abide by, of which one of them is July 1st, 23, excuse me.
So if I went out and got my house appraised today and came to the grievance review process, you're going to say it's not valid because it was done in today's market value versus when you did yours?
Well,
They can adjust it.
Yeah.
What's that?
They can adjust it. They can time adjust the rates based on.
Who adjusted it? You were the appraiser that I hired.
Well, I mean, if you brought your appraisal to me.
Well, I'm saying now, because I'm in this, if I want mine challenged, if I get it appraised, is it worth my time to do it? Because you're going to say, no, it's not.
If you have it done before the end of March, I would recommend you submit it. They will do their analysis. When you get the result in May, if you disagree with the number they come up with, you can bring it to me. I can do my own analysis, and we can see where that ends up. You have options, and
so one final question. You said you were a licensed appraiser, but all the staff that worked on this, are they all licensed appraisers
Yes.
in New York State?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
A few years ago, in the Syracuse paper, they always had the different counties in the region, the sale, how many sales there were in that county, versus the average price. What is the average home sale?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I could get that for you. Okay.
I mean, it'd be nice if the paper would
Yeah.
provide that information. And I just want to say one more thing. Last week, I did get a message, because I am 65 and older, from the Office for the Aged, stating that they have different programs available, and you can call them. But I don't know if
Excellent.
people connected that with the situation.
Great. Anyone else?
We can go back into the site and enter a new review or no?
What I would suggest is call the 866 number and let them know that you've submitted an application, so there's not redundancy or duplication. So I would call the 866 number, and if you have supplemental information that you want to submit in addition to your original application, there's a sort of a process to do that. Yeah.
The reason I asked is that I went in, it brought me 2 hours to try to do an advanced search. And what we were doing, we were trying to supplant the comparatives that were set up in there with ones that I wanted to put in. So I called, I did get an answer, you had to go with sale within the last 2 years. When I went in to change the date of my search, it wouldn't allow me to change the year. I changed the month and the date, but not the year.
Yeah.
So I used those 5 comparables that were in there.
Yeah, I would call the 866 number, we can walk you through. I think if you've already submitted an application, so we don't get duplication and, with different information, you may be prohibited to do that, but call the 866 number and they can, if you have other sales that you want us to consider, that's something that you would just talk through with the representative on the phone. Yeah.
Okay, so I think we are all done. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. Again, if you have any additional questions, we're here.
Thank you for being here, panel, and thank you